Listen.
Live up in this mother lover. 1 2 1 2. Check, check. Let's make sure we're all live and direct. What's going on, mother lovers? Welcome back to another episode of some stuff you might not never know nothing about. See, I got it right there. We're in watershed time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just in case you're putting the kids away or whatever. You know what I mean? I didn't mean dropping the kids off by the pool. I mean, actually putting them to bed. You know what I mean? Shout out to all the crew locked in. My name is Mice Diggy. I'm here with my co-host, Dan DNA. What's going on, brother? Holding down the boards, holding down the buttons, making sure everything running smooth. You know what I mean? It's going to be a smooth one tonight.
Yeah,
because we'll be running VT, mate. We'll be running VT. Yes, back again, man. Hey, shout out to everyone that was locked in last week. We appreciate each one of you mother lovers, man. Telling you, because, you know, it feels special that we could pull this off as much as we can. I was going to say every week, but as much as we can every week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And get to chat to you lot, find out how everyone's doing. Been a bit of a mad week. You know, last week we celebrated our brother Ty. May him rest in peace. So we couldn't do the show then, obviously, but we'll have some we'll have some memories to share with you lot in the next coming weeks. You know what I mean? When it comes to that event, shout out to everybody that was there, man. So many people.
Yeah, it was manic.
It was nuts, man. It was nuts.
After 40 minutes, what the 5 microphone cables look like on the stage.
Shout out to Peaches.
I was having a panic because for me, I'm like, no, you need to keep your cables tidy. So I was
Spaghetti Junction up there. It was Spaghetti Junction. Yeah, so you had
I was like, I wanted to get up there and like start untangling stuff, but there weren't even a space between acts
to do that.
Sort of just untangle 1 or 2 cables.
That weren't happening, bro. You'll be lucky to pull that off. Like, yeah.
And the fear was obviously you had like Black Twang at the end, and it was going to break his neck.
You know what I mean?
Like the big finale.
Twist up, yeah. Just twist up in the cables. I ain't gonna lie, you know what I mean? I had to pull off a couple moves. You know when you just slightly trip? Yeah. I had to pull off because I can't. You see me? I can't stand still on the stage. I'm walking up and down, I'm trying to cover the whole thing, trying to be a one-man band up there.
Yeah.
And it's in the middle. The Spaghetti Junction was in the middle because obviously people gotta understand. Anyway, let's shout out everybody that was there. I mean, who we got? There was Isetta Sheriff, The Freshers, Genesis Elijah, K9, Skinny Man, and he brought a crew with him. Shout to Mac Jehu and the crew that performed with him. Shout to Logic and Amy True, Haroon Khan. Who else? I feel like I'm missing out someone else as well. The Beatbox Collective. Shout out to DJ Shorty Blitz, DJ Baby Blue. As I said, Peaches held down the hosting. She killed it with the hosting. I was like, yeah, I taught you well. Peach. I taught her well, D. No, you know, she said to me years ago, she was like, I can do that. Well, she must have come to a Kung Fu or something like that, or seen me hosting somewhere. She was just staring like, and I was like, right, why is she staring at me like that?
Yeah.
And then after, when I came off, spoke to her, and she said, I could do that. I could do what you're doing. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, the hosting, I could do that. I goes, yeah, I think you could, you know. I actually think you could, so definitely go for it. And yeah, she's been killing it for years.
She managed to wrangle all them different artists on that stage, on and off.
You know what I mean?
And some of them didn't want to get off.
Yeah, some of us did the hug it up.
You see her waiting at the side of the stage.
She was ready, sniped up. She's
with the look.
She had it cocked, like gun was cocked. Like, yo, I'll pop off. You got 2 minutes left on this. Yeah, man. But yeah, it was an amazing time, man. Obviously very emotional for a lot of us that were friends with Ty, had worked with him. his mum and his sister was there as well. So, you know, the energy was really, that sort of emotional energy was really up there. And it felt good. Like, I think it's a good thing that we can, you know, even if we don't all see each other all the time, at least once a year we can come together in the spirit of Thai and just enjoy each other's music, watch each other perform, and, you know what I mean? Crack joke backstage and that. There was a lot of jokes running backstage. And yeah, it was good to see quite a few different people. Paul H, you know what I mean? The hip-hop photographer was there, man. I know some of you lot will know about Paul H, man. He's been around for time. Hip Hop Connection, like bare different magazines. He said he's, you know, doing other stuff now, still photography, but more high end. I think it is. You know, he didn't want to. Yeah, he didn't want to tell
Coffee
me, but I
table
could tell.
books.
Yeah, it was more high end. Like
Country Life magazine.
Horses. Like, takes pictures of thoroughbreds. He's taking pictures of bare thoroughbreds and trying to find like the ultimate Shire horse. Yeah, Shire horses, that's some next. You're like, what the hell is going on here, man? Like, what do they eat? Yeah, so there was a bunch of people there as well. Shout out to DJ Locke, held me down. We had a wicked performance. All the performances were crazy as well, man. Everybody went in. And, man, you know, shout out to everyone who made it down there to enjoy it as well, man. I think the crowd really made it even more something special because they were loud, man. They were making noise all the way through as well. And, you know, it's a shame we only had like 3 hours there. It's only from 7, or I think it was like 7 o'clock till 10:30, something like that. Yeah. 3.5 hours. So, you know, hopefully next time, man, we can do something and have a little party after as well so everybody can catch up properly, man. But, yeah, that was blessed. And Dan DNA came down, did some filming. So, you know, we'll have some VT to run on that a bit in the coming weeks, man.
Yeah.
Right, let me shout out the crew that's locked in right about now. Big up to King Chico. What's going on, brother? IBMCs, yes. Okay, Mr. Green up in here. Yep. Yeah, you can call me Maestro if you want. My name's Mike Stiggy. It doesn't matter to me now. Before I used to get emotional about that, but I've let it go now. Yes, man. Shout out to Black the Ripper, man. R.I.P. as well. Yeah, man, that was hard stuff, man, but it was good to be able to celebrate time, must say. Shout out to Oshi, locked in. I wonder where you are, man. Shout out to hey, Straker, yeah, Baby Blue, brother. I thought of you. When I saw Baby Blue, I was like, Straker. Shout out to Bode Sharp and all the crew locked in, man. All the silent listeners, we see you, mother lovers. We see you. And of course, before we go any further, mother lovers, you know what I got to do, man. I got to give a shout out to the Connoisseurs UK. You know what I mean? The Connoisseurs UK are specializers. Specializers? Are specialists. Specializers?
Yeah, you've got your own language.
Yeah, I can throw in specializers. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the Connoisseurs UK specialize in CBD products. And I'm talking all types of products from chocolate, Belgian chocolate, like dark or milk, whichever you want, man. Whichever you want, brother, sister. If you want some CBD balm, you can get that too. If you want some spray, this oil is quite special. You spray it under the tongue, hold it there for a few minutes or whatever, then you can swallow. Even swish it about if you want, because your mouth absorbs nutrients, you know, so you can do that. But it's one of those things, like I say, if you're having trouble sleeping, it'll probably help you sleep. If you feel like you're a bit too hyperactive, you're anxious, it'll probably calm you down. You know, it's got that adaptogen vibe to it. You can also get it in either sativa form or strictly indica form. You can also get a full spectrum, which would be both. And I'd advise going for full spectrum because, you know, either way, either or, you're feeling good. And if you blaze out there as well, jeez, hit that. And I'm telling you don't need to blaze as much, bro. You save on all them drawers you're buying, boy. And you also, the special thing about what the Connoisseurs do is they make Belgian chocolate stirrers. Chocolate stirrers, D. You know, some of you lot can't be going too crazy on the sugars and all that, but listen, get that chocolate stirrer, hot water in the cup, stir it around for a little while, bam. That's a chocolate drink, but CBD'd up. You know what I mean? In other words, infused with CBD. And it's a very relaxing drink. have you ready for bed, man. You know what I mean? Hit them up, cannasseursuk.com. Make sure you hit them up, cannasseursuk.com. And when you get to the checkout, you type in SYMNNKNA. SYMNNKNA, you know what that is. That's something you might not never know nothing about as an acronym. That's right, mother lovers. SYMNNNKNA will get you 20% off any of your orders from cannasseursuk.com. How did the voice, do you reckon that was?
It's nearly there.
Nearly there,
yeah,
innit? I'm working on it.
Going for the adverts.
Yeah, I'm working on it, man. I'm slowly, you know what I mean? Slowly getting there. So make sure you hit them up. So, yo, we got a special one today. Or tonight, I should say. Shout out to Regantology locked in. Shout out to your more. Hey, you lot hit us up with the roll call, man. Hit us up with the roll call. When we come back halfway through this interview, we'll see who's on what and where, you know, what time and how and what them, you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Shout out to our brother Vinny B. He hooked this up for us, man. For me, this was very special because I bought, we're going to speak to two authors, or we spoke to two authors, and you're going to listen to them now, who wrote a book that was suggested by some people out there who, you know, in my opinion, were very brave to speak out. Obviously, during the whole madness that was going on since 2020, March 2020, I believe, where we were told to do things for reasons we couldn't understand. And up till now, some of you mother lovers still don't understand. Which is partly why we're here. I feel it's important. The more people know about this, the more likely we'll be able to overturn any forms of tyranny that may be coming. You know what I mean? Possibly. I don't know. People say it. I still don't, you know what I mean? I don't really subscribe to it enough, but that's the bottom line. It's like the more we understand about how our bodies work, how it really works, do you know what I mean? Then the better it is for us, the more sovereignty we have, the more we don't have to worry about things. And part of that is getting past this whole thing of people being qualified to tell you how your body works. Somebody else is qualified and they're telling you how your body works. They don't know you from Adam, but we all know people are different. We all know Dan might like, you know, what is it, your raw milk?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I might not like raw milk. I might not like milk at all. I might prefer oat milk. There's a difference there. If I drink milk, I might get bubble guts or something. I might not. Do you know what I mean? I drink milk, by the way. I'm just trying to throw out there that we're all quite different. We're the same, the way our body works, but in terms of our makeup, we might, you know, some people prefer savory foods over sweet foods and vice versa. You know, some people prefer this type of drink, than dark liquor than light liquor, and vice versa. All these different things. So the main thing is us understanding how our bodies work in a general term, and then understanding how our own, like for me, what works best for me. What are the best sort of products I should be using to heal, to stay healthy? Because some of these things could make you ill. The question is, what really makes you ill?
Nice link.
Let's find out from Dawn Lester and David Parker.
Hello!
This is going to be very deep, mother lovers, so get ready.
Hello! Run VT!
Run VT, that should be something. I can't hear it though.
Master authors, by the way, of this book right here, What Really Makes You Ill and Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease is Wrong. You look at it and you're like, why would I want to try and read all of that? That's way too much. Tell me what it's about. Do you know what I mean? But I think with what we've been going through over the last, 2.5, nearly 3 years now, people got to pull their thumb out and start doing the stuff that they didn't want to do in the beginning. And I believe both of you have actually done that by putting this book together. Can we talk about your backgrounds and what got you into this? Because obviously one of the first things people will say is, yeah, but they're not doctors. Who are they to tell us? You know?
Exactly. exactly. Yeah, we're happy to explain that, and it's a fair question. And the way we got into it, well, 17 years ago, I guess.
Wow.
I'll keep it brief, so I don't want to bore your audience, but
No,
it's a valid question to know why we, myself as a retired electrical engineer, and Dawn was an accountant, but we both are professional people and both worked and had to become qualified in our individual fields, so we had to study and pass exams the same way as doctors do. And of course, what we say to people is anyone can study anything. And just because you may be qualified in one thing, like me as an electrical engineer, doesn't stop me studying something else. And what Dawn and I had to do is use the same way as anyone else. We used our intellect. We used our ability to follow the evidence. We used our abilities to
be
logical and be careful about details. And if anyone pays due diligence to any subject, they can learn anything they want. And we had to do this, and we fell into it accidentally when we were writing a book, as I say, about 17 years ago, about the nature of reality. So nothing to do with the medical system. And at that time, 17 years ago, we believed what everyone else believed, and the most of the world still believes, which is that germs of one sort or another make you ill, either bacterial or viruses. We believe that because that's what we'd been told. We believe that vaccinations were good for you and conferred immunity. And we believe that doctors knew what they were talking about, and everything they did was based on solid science. That's what we believed 17 years ago. But we're writing this book about the nature of reality, and under our pen name at that time, which is it was NOR, Nature of Reality, the initials. So we had a chapter in it where we had to write something about health and something about viruses. And we realized that at that time, we didn't really know much about viruses. So we needed to start doing some research, which we did. And that was the start of it. That opened up this huge tin of worms. The first thing that we looked at was just happened to be, if you believe in coincidences, which we don't, just happened to be HIV/AIDS. And as we started to examine what that was all about, because we were, Dawn and I were adults in the 80s, so we grew up with all the fear mongering that was put out about HIV. We were told that by the dear old BBC that at least 50 million people were going to die worldwide. It was incurable. And that although it had started in the homosexual community in San Francisco, it was going to spread into the heterosexual community. And we're all doomed, basically.
Yeah, they said
the BBC were putting up videos of rows of tombstones, just to really scare people. And it was really scary, really scary.
I remember in school, they said that we could catch it off the toilet. You catch AIDS off the toilet seat. Just sitting on the toilet seat. We're telling kids that. Everyone's trying their best not to touch the toilet seat now. And
sorry. It was crazy. And of course, anyone who lived through all that, which we did, we could see all the parallels between that and what's been happening over this last 2.5 years. So it's the same game plan, just a few different words.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress slightly. So we started to study it and started to realize we came across people like Carrie Mullis, whose name gets bandied about now with the PCR process. He got the Nobel Prize for it. And we found him. I mean, he's no longer with us, but he was around then and saying, this is not what my PCR process was designed for. Wow. It's not designed to detect a disease. It can't tell you whether you're ill or not. It can't detect a so-called virus. And he was saying this, and as I say, he got the Nobel Prize for it, and yet all the governments were totally ignoring him. So that was a red flag to us. We thought, well, how can you ignore the person that's invented it? He's telling you don't use it. It can't be used for that. And you're carrying on and ignoring him and telling people that they're HIV positive based on a test which he's saying won't work for that. It was never designed for that. So we knew there was a problem. So we kept on looking, and the more we looked, the more we realized that there was no virus that had ever been proved scientifically to exist and cause AIDS, and that was the start of it. And Dawn and I said to one another, blimey, you know, if they're so wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? And that was the start of our 10 years research. So we spent longer studying the medical system than doctors do. You know, they spend about 5 or 6 years before they get their MD certificate. We spent over 10 years researching it, and we had to be very thorough, because we knew that if we got it wrong when we published the book, that we were going to get crucified by the medical system. So we've been very careful, and the book contains at least 40 pages of citations and references so that people can check the sources. You know, we weren't just doing scans of Wikipedia or something. You know, we had to go back to all the original papers, so we know it's solid. And of course, our book's been out best part of 3 years now, and no one has been able to disprove anything we've said. And in fact, we've had many doctors, including people like Dr. Andy Kaufman and Tom Cowan and Stefan Lanka, and many others, you know, Samantha Bailey and Mark Bailey and many others. And they've contacted us, talked to us, they have our book, and they agree with us, you know. So many doctors now from the medical profession are realizing the errors of their ways, if you like, the errors that they were taught at medical school.
What was it like for you then, sort of realizing this? Because at that sort of moment when, you know, I'm trying to understand how you were sure then that they'd got it all wrong, off the back of obviously Carrie Mullis and other doctors. I believe, was it C.T. Fry?
T.C. Fry.
T.C. Fry. And there were a few people really speaking out. I think it was T.C. Fry who he did the launch of his book, right? And then he had an AIDS patient there and took his blood, drew the AIDS patient's blood, and then pricked himself with the blood and said, look, I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to die from AIDS. It's all rubbish. I believe there's a video out there like that, but it's still hard to believe, because it's you're looking at an image of somebody. You don't know whether that really is an AIDS patient. You don't know whether he's really injecting himself. But for you both sort of running into this and finding out that the medical system isn't what you thought it was, how did you deal with that mentally?
We were shocked, you know, because it literally pulled the rug out from everything we'd believed, you know, all our lives, what we'd been taught at school and college. So it was a great shock. I mean, we were truly shocked. So we understand how difficult it is for people to come across it now. And that's why we called the book, gave it the title we did, because we obviously wanted to find out what really did make people ill, if it wasn't germs, which we discuss in depth in the book. The subtitle of the book, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong, is because that's where we found ourselves 17 years ago. Everything we thought we knew, everything we'd been taught about disease was wrong. And this is what doctors are finding, and that's why they're coming out. The people I mentioned just have had to come out of the medical system, because they've realized that they were not helping people using the pharmaceutical products. In fact, they were making people ill, and in some cases, killing them. And I know you mentioned that, you know, we all came across that rather strange word, iatrogenesis, which is basically translated into normal language means death by modern medicine. You know, it's when doctors have prescribed a drug to a patient, and the patient has taken the drug as prescribed in the method prescribed, and it's killed them. And, you know, we looked at the figures in America, because they were easier to get hold of, still are. And something like 200,000 people a year are killed by the medical system. And this is not malpractice. This is just taking the medication they've been given in the way they've been told. And it's killed them, poisoned them, basically.
And those statistics only really apply to inpatients, you know, within a hospital setting. So this doesn't apply to people who are, you know, outside of the hospital system. So again, you know, the numbers are probably
much
almost
higher.
certainly much higher. I mean, these particular statistics are taken from the situation in America, and that is one of the countries with the highest level of prescription drug use. So you know, it would apply to every country where they have the same kind of system, but again, depending on how many pharmaceuticals people are taking. And you know, I mean, we're just horrified sometimes hearing that people are on you know 10, 15 different drugs, which is amazing. But again, it'll vary in different countries, but obviously within the US, that's, you know, that's the figure. And it's growing all the time.
But these figures, the general public don't know. They don't, you know, I mean, something like that, 200,000 people, you know, I mean, if you put it in black and white, as it were, 200,000 people have died this year, being poisoned by the medical establishment. I mean, if paper headlines were like that, because that's the truth, I mean, people would be horrified, wouldn't they? They'd say, we want a public inquiry into this. But of course, the powers that be don't want that, and so it's hidden from the public unless you dig for it.
It's amazing how well hidden it is as well, because of the fact that, so even just using that word iatrogenesis or iatrogenic, people have no idea what that really means. So the doctor can say, yeah, they had a iatrogenic situation, and then just the layman would be, oh, wow, okay. And then next minute they died. Yeah, they died of cancer, or they died of the flu. You know, when people, when this whole corona thing was happening, and I was a bit confused myself because, you know, I was trying to understand like how a cold could be. And then people were saying, people die of the flu all the time. People, I couldn't even believe that. I was like, people die of the flu. Because as far as I was concerned, the flu is you get a cold, but you probably got a bit of a fever. You stay in bed for a bit longer than you would for a cold. I'm still trying to work out the differences between the two. We could get into that.
It's purely...
There aren't any differences,
yeah, exactly.
really. It's a question of the symptoms. But again, so again, that's the subtitle of the book, you know, calling these things either a cold or the flu is a problematic as well, because they aren't distinct things, because these are symptoms, you know, sets of symptoms. And that's why, as I said, there's no actual difference apart from just the different symptoms that people express. So again, you know, if it's, you know, like a fever and, you know, sort of shivers and aches, people tend to call it the flu. And if it's milder, people tend to call it a cold.
Yeah.
But I do that in inverted commas, literally, because these aren't separate conditions. They're not actual conditions.
It's just severity. It's just different severity, which will depend on the amount of toxicity that you've taken in. They're detox symptoms, which, as anyone who reads the book will see, and this is what we found over the 10 years. There are what we call the 4 factors, which we found were the real reasons why people got ill, and that none of those factors are anything to do with germs. Because what we had to do through our 10 years of research is to try and find if there were any scientific papers that where someone had actually isolated a germ, whether a bacteria or a virus, and gone through all the scientific tests to prove that, yes, it was a pathogen, i.e. something that causes a disease and causes harm. And those scientific papers should exist, but they don't anywhere. They didn't exist. Well, they just have never existed. And this, of course, was what more and more people like Carrie Mullis and Dr. Andy Kaufman and all these other doctors, when they started to investigate too, they found that everything we've said is true. None of these scientific papers exist. No one ever, anywhere in the world, has ever proved that a germ of any sort is the actual cause of a disease. And of course, this is very shocking to people, as it was to us, and set us on the track of finding out why people did get ill. And we found that in the majority, well, in all cases, it boiled down to the 4 factors, which we talk about in our book, which is lack of correct nutrition, which is not the amount of food you eat, but it's having nutritious food. And we found that if people were eating a lot of processed food, even if it said vegan on it or something like that, there's no nutritional value in it. So the only way you get proper nutrition is to eat fresh fruit and vegetables, really. And if you can eat organic, fresh fruit and vegetables, then they're less likely to have been sprayed with pesticides and insecticides and, and grown in healthy soil. So eating good food is really important, and that gives you the correct nutrition so that your body can work properly. And we can explain that we do explain it in detail in the book. And then the other thing we found was toxicity, of course. People get exposed to various toxins throughout their days and their whole life. And this can be, as we say, what you put in and on your body. So it's not only what you may take in through your food and what you drink, because as we know, the water that comes out of your tap isn't clean. There's chloride and fluoride added to it, and there's all sorts of other stuff, as we found, leaches into it, because the processing plant where your water comes from are not very good at getting out the trace elements of pharmaceutical products and heavy metals and things like that. So you've got all this stuff coming in through your water, which looks clean, but isn't. And so you're taking in toxins that way. So we recommend to people to use either a distiller to keep clean water, or what's called a reverse osmosis system, which is a set of 4 or 5 filters, which filters your water. That way you can always be sure you've got clean water. So people's personal care products, we found that, again, we detail these in the book, can contain lots of toxic materials, so which leaches in through your skin. So this can be a steady thing over what you put in and on your body. You can be slowly being poisoned a little bit more every day. So we've got nutrition and toxicity. Then, of course, we had to look at EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. We're all exposed to them. Anything electrical gives out electrical frequencies, which as many people, including the pharmaceutical companies, tend to forget that the body has an electrical system as well as a chemical system. But pharmaceutical products only ever look to address the chemical system of the body. They don't do anything about the electrical system. But of course, that's just as important. If the electrical system of the body doesn't work properly, your nervous system, your brain, your heart, all of these things, then they don't work properly. Well, EMFs can affect all those things. Sorry, did you want to?
So, because you were talking about the medical system, don't look at that side of things, but it's almost like they provoke more damage by using the X-ray, MRIs. Wouldn't that be right?
Yes, exactly. Wow. They put out tremendous electrical fields, and the medical system have recognized that, particularly with X-rays. So they try to limit the amount of, over your lifetime, how much you're exposed to X-rays. I mean, I often joke, because I'm very old, I can remember when I was a kid, you could go into shoe shops and they had little machines in there, which were X-ray machines, and you could put your feet in them and look at your bones, and you could do this. And, obviously they don't do that anymore, but that's just shows how little they knew about the damage they're doing to people, where you could just go and do that. I mean, as kids, we found it fascinating that we could see all the bones in our feet when we stuck our feet in these machines. But but this is it. I mean, the medical establishment do learn a few things over the years, but
after they've tried it out on the human population
and caused a lot of problems.
Whoops! But guess what? We can sort you out. Just come over here. We'll give you some of these. Take some of these. Do these. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So they cause something and then provide you with a solution as well, which keeps you a customer. So again, it's a great business model.
It's perfect.
So EMFs, not so easy to avoid, because they're all around us, and because we all use electrical equipment, including mobile phones and Wi-Fi and all of this sort of thing. So the only thing you can do is be wise to it and just mitigate how you use it. We always sort of recommend, with your mobile phone, don't put it to your head. Always use it on hands-free. Don't have it in your bedroom when you go to bed. Certainly don't put it under your pillow, like we found some people do, just in case they get that really important text message while they're asleep. Switch your Wi-Fi router off if you can. I mean, not everyone can. I mean, I can't. I've got so much stuff connected to it. But you just you just make sure that you're not sleeping near it or it's near any members of the family. I mean, obviously, as an electrical engineer, I've got the equipment that I can measure EMF levels. And sometimes people ask me, well, what would you recommend? Well, I can say now, I use a little meter called a tri-field meter, which you can buy off Amazon. I mean, it's not cheap. It's about £180. But I found it's for the general public, well, for anyone really, it's very easy to use, and just has some instructions with it that tells you what the safe levels of the various frequencies and things are when you measure them. So you don't need to be an electrical engineer to understand it, and it'll give you what the true safe levels are, not what the government tells you or the telecommunications, because those levels are way too high. So this one will tell you what is actually a safe level. So you can do a scan of your house, you can see what's happening, you can move things around. Because it can see through walls, you know. So if your next door neighbor, if you live in a semi-detached house or you're in a flat or something, you can see what's either coming through your ceiling or your floor or your walls. So, you know, you may find that your room is quite low level, but you're getting a high signal coming from your next door neighbor's Wi-Fi unit, which is right on the other side of the wall next to your favorite armchair. So you can move your chair. So there's things you can do once you can measure these things. Because it's not cheap, you know, it's best part of £200, and I don't have any connections with the company. I sometimes wish I do, because lots of people have bought these things. But it's the only way. Unless you've got something to measure it, you've no idea with EMFs what you're being exposed to. What we find is that groups get together and buy one between them. You know, everyone chips in a £5 or something, and then you can share it, because you don't need it all the time. Once you just check your house regularly and just make sure that you've not got something new being exposed to.
So the electrical industry knows, because you're saying that there are instruments to measure the level of EMF. So it's known that a high level is dangerous to the human body, or is it to the environment?
Yeah.
But it's still put out there willy-nilly, like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, because the telecommunications industry and the military, it's in their interest not to have the public realize the level of electrical pollution they're putting out. You know, the military with their radar and communication systems, and also the telecommunications systems. And so their lobbyists, I mean, the telecommunications company have probably more money than the pharmaceutical companies. They're hugely rich. So they can put a lot of pressure on governments to set the levels, so-called safe levels, really high. But for those who want to really look at it, I mean, I think it was 2019 bioinitiative, and I think that document is still, you can still pick it up probably on the internet. And there's hundreds of doctors and scientists that are members of that bioinitiative. And there's all the reports there where they've examined what are truly safe levels and what are not. So all the technical scientific information is there and has been for years. But again, governments choose to ignore it because the telecommunications industry and the military do not want you to know. And so the levels are set at a level where it's what they call the heating effect. And it's basically, they don't consider it to become unsafe unless it's actually heating up the cells in your body.
What?
Basically like a microwave. Yeah. But as the bioinitiative report from all these scientists, and there's hundreds of them worldwide, say that cellular damage occurs way before any heating effects come into play. And so that's why it's important not to believe what the government tells you, and to protect yourself by finding out what the safe levels are with the meter, like I've just mentioned, the tri-field meter or something similar. I advise people not to buy cheaper ones because they're just not accurate enough. You know, it's the usual story. You get what you pay for, you know, so you need to have a decent one that's giving you the right information.
Look, man, these lot spend £200
and at
on
least
trainers.
then you can sort of take evasive action as much as we can. So that's three things. And then the last factor that we found, which affects people's health, is prolonged stress, emotional stress, which of course a lot of people have been under a lot this last 2.5 years, haven't they? Deliberately caused by our illustrious governments. And because it not only, when you're under stress for a long time continuously, which people have been because they've been afraid of this non-existent thing that's likely to attack them. So they're really scared, and we've come across these people really scared. You know,
we know a few of them for sure.
So they're under constant fear, which is not only has a psychological effect, it also has a physiological effect. Whenever people are under stress, or any of these 4 factors that I've mentioned, they all create in the body what are called free radicals. And this is, from an electrical point of view, they're ions, which is spelled IONS, not the type of stuff you iron your shirt with. These are ions, which are when a molecule or an atom has lost one or more of its electrons, it becomes positively charged and then can start to damage at cellular level in the body. Now, this is a normal process. The body does produce ions all the time, but providing you have the right nutritional level, which produces antioxidants, which neutralize the ions. So you can see where this balance, why it's important to have correct nutrition. And your body's fine with that. It's producing ions, and it's producing antioxidants, and that everything's okay. But if it gets out of balance, where your body is undernourished and also subjected to higher toxicity levels, which can be EMFs or other toxins, and high stress, then you've got an imbalance where the body is now forced into producing more of these ions, more of these free radicals, which causes what's known as oxidative stress, which starts to damage you at tissue level, and if left unchecked, can start to damage organs. And so you can start to get organ damage, organ failure, things like tumors, cancers, all of these things. This is when it's prolonged and not addressed properly. So this is what we found. I'm just giving a thumbnail sketch of it all for your listeners, but obviously we go into much more detail in the book. That's why it's so big. But this is what we've found over more than 10 years now, because we continue to research all this because of what's happened to the world in the last 2.5 years. It became necessary to continue the research. One is to make sure that we've not missed anything, and 2 is to, with all the new bits of nonsense that they keep bringing out and trying to frighten everyone with some new disease, we needed to stay on top of that and make sure that there was nothing new that had come out that people need to be worried about, and certainly there isn't. And as you said yourself, health is a very natural thing. It's very simple to stay healthy, and that's the natural thing to be. Being ill is the unnatural thing. So once you know how the body works, and you know that it's very simple to stay healthy, and it doesn't need to, it's not expensive. You've not got to buy lots of supplements and take special treatments or anything like that. It's all very simple. It's eating natural, healthy food. Don't expose yourself any more than necessary to toxic materials. The body's very clever, and it can handle a lot of this stuff, providing it's not overloaded. It's like anything else. If you think, you take something that's really toxic, like arsenic, for instance, or cyanide, you can obviously overwhelm the body, and it can't cope with it, and it could most likely kill you. But in small doses, providing you've got the right nutritional level, and you keep all the other 4 factors in line, then your body will cope with it. If you've started to get an excess of toxicity, let's say, and then your body starts to show symptoms, like you mentioned, what people call the common cold, or even the flu, these are detox mechanisms where the body has not been able to get rid of the toxins under its normal methods of through urination or excrement or sweating even, or vomiting in extreme situations, or even diarrhea. I'm sorry if anyone's eating their breakfast. But these things, this is how the body gets rid of toxic material. But if it's not able to get rid of it quick enough, or it will use other methods, and it will employ the mucous membranes to also start to draw out the toxic material. And this is when you start to get the runny nose and you're coughing up phlegm, and people go, oh, you've got a cold. Or if it's extreme, oh, you've got the flu. But these are not diseases. You know, there is no virus that causes a cold or the flu. And this, of course, is why they've never been able to find a cure for the common cold, because if you're looking for a virus, you're not going to find one, you know, so otherwise they'd have done it, wouldn't they? I mean, colds have been around for a long time, but it's just a detox mechanism. So once people start to understand what the body is doing, which doctors don't, unfortunately, because they're not trained to do that. So what they do is try to give you a pharmaceutical product which will suppress those symptoms. So it's actually fighting the body. The body is trying to heal itself and get rid of toxins, and the medical pharmaceutical companies are trying to suppress those symptoms, so the body can't get rid of the toxins. So, you know, and this is crazy. As I said, we had to examine how doctors were trained, and when we talked to them, we realized that, you know, when they go through their medical training for 5 years, maybe 6 years, they don't get to do any research themselves. They're just taught by rote. You know, they're bombarded with loads of information, which basically boils down to, you know, well, this bacteria causes this disease, and this is the drug you give for it, or this virus causes this disease, and this is the drug you give for that. They never get to do any research. They never get to look at any scientific papers. You know, they never get to ask questions like, well, how do you know that this virus causes this disease? They don't get to ask those questions, otherwise they get kicked off the course. So they just have to accept it as fact, and have to accept that what their lecturers are telling them is true. In the same way as we did when we were at school. You know, we accept what the teacher tells us, and at college what the college lecturer tells us. And so when we examined this and talked to doctors, and they agreed with us that this is how they're taught, and it's only when they got away from medical college and started to do their own investigations, for those who had woken up and realized that there was no scientific evidence to prove what they'd been taught. But then when we looked at the colleges, we found that most of the medical training colleges were actually owned by the pharmaceutical companies, and that the curriculums were set by the pharmaceutical companies, and that the college libraries were stocked by the pharmaceutical companies, and many of the lecturers were employed by the pharmaceutical companies. So you can see the pattern. So doctors then, it's not surprising that doctors then have become unwittingly basically salesmen for the pharmaceutical companies, because they don't know any better. You know, it's not that they're all evil people and that they know exactly the truth, but they're keeping it from the public. It's just they don't know. And when they do know, and when they find out, as I say, like Andy Kaufman and Tom Cowan and others, they realize they've got to get out of the profession, because they're hurting people.
Yeah, it's not what they signed up for.
Yeah.
I saw, I've got some friends in France, and we spoke about this. This is probably 2016, 17. So before all of the madness going on. And two of them have, both of them have parents or fathers that are doctors. And I don't know how it came up, but obviously I mentioned to you that I have a iatrogenic situation that I had a long time ago. So I've always been, and since then, I've always been a bit wary of the medical system anyway, but not knowing everything that I know now. And so we were talking about, you know, how it works. And he said that he remembered his dad saying sort of back in the 70s or 80s, how it worked was the pharmaceutical companies, if they wanted you to sell one of their products, or, you know, sell one of their products, use one of their products in your practice, what they would do was send you some money. It might be 20 grand or whatever, But then the law had changed, so they weren't allowed to do that. So what they did instead was you'd get this note saying, here, I've booked a ticket for you and your family to go on holiday for 2 weeks here or whatever. And this is sort of the gesture, you know, of like, look, and then when you get to your hotel room, there might be a briefcase full of money or whatever. But these are the sort of ways that they were making sure their products were being sold by the doctors. And you know, I don't know. I'm sitting there thinking, so would the doctor not be thinking, this is a bit weird, isn't it? Like, why would you be trying to bribe me to sell your products? But they're looking at it as, oh, all these companies are in competition. Either I sell these pills for this ailment or I sell, you know, these guys' pills. So they're looking at it like that instead of actually, this is all some dark, twisted, you know, idea of...
They'd probably see it as just a, you know, a perk of the job, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, as you say, and it's just a, well, you know, try this particular brand as opposed to that particular brand made by a different company. So yeah, you can see why they might think of it in that way. But as you say, exactly. It's still interesting that this is not a new practice. As you say, it's been going on for absolutely decades, and they're just changing it to make it more and more difficult for doctors to be able to see what's going on without realizing that they then have a serious conflict of interest if they want to carry on with their career and they still want to care for their patients or, you know, provide care for their patients. So you know, it's getting more and more obvious that there's a serious problem.
And this is what we call the golden handcuffs. You know, doctors are in a nice job which they get well paid for.
Yep.
And then they realize that if they speak out, that job's gone because the establishment drops on them like a ton of bricks. And it really does. Every doctor we've talked to that's had to come out, you know, as soon as they speak out, and this is whether it's New Zealand, when we're talking to the Baileys, the doctors over there, or America, wherever we've talked to doctors who've had to come out, as soon as they've spoken out, the establishment is all over them, you know, and threatens them with lawsuits and all sorts of things. So it's a, you know, anyone, the only thing they can do is totally come out and don't practice. They're not allowed to practice, if you like, anymore as an MD. You know, they're still doctors, of course, they've got a qualification, but they're not allowed to practice as doctors anymore. And so they move into so-called alternative fields and advise people that way. But it puts them on the same basis as us. You know, we're not allowed to give specific medical, anything that could be construed as specific medical advice to someone is illegal. We're not allowed to do that. We can only sort of suggest things, or that people might like to look at this, you know, in the way we do in the book. We can say, well, this is what we found out. We're not allowed to actually say specifically some of the things, which just shows you what a concocted system it is, where they've managed to get the laws where ordinary human beings can't talk to one another freely about medical things without being threatened by the law, you know, that they'll be sued or something. So it's a very corrupt system at the top of the pyramid, if you like, that's keeping control of this and stopping the freedom of information. And that's why, if people think about it, they never see in the mainstream media anyone debating these things that we're talking about today. You know, why aren't they having some of these doctors like Dr. Andy Kaufman or Dr. SYMNNKNA or any of these doctors who have said, look, we found out something different, or even us, you know, who spent 10 years looking at this, to give an alternative view so that the general population can make up their own mind. You know, they can make informed decisions. But none of that has happened, has it? You know, none of it has happened in the papers, magazines, radio, television, nothing. And that ought to make people suspicious. You know, if it was anything else that people were talking about, you know, even, you know, war in Ukraine or, you know, anything, there's always a debate at some stage somewhere in the public media, but not about this, not about what's been going off over this last 2.5 years. No debates at all. One-sided, it's a one-sided discussion. So we and people like us have to, and yourself have to work extra hard to try and put the information in front of people. And that's why we wrote the book. So we thought, well, if we write a book and put it out there, people can buy it and they can read what we found out over 10 years of solid research, and and doing the videos like this that and we try. Well, it's basically our full-time work now. I mean,
wow,
this is what we do to try our best, because it's so serious. People are dying. People are dying all over the world. Even with these, I think I can say the word jab.
Say whatever you want, man. We'll edit it out after.
I mean, the government's own yellow card system in the UK shows that over 2,000 people have died as a direct result of the jab. And that's their own information. Now, in any other year before this nonsense that's befallen on the world, if any drug had killed even 5 people, it would have been taken off the market.
Crazy,
but
man.
This drug, which has been jabbed into people, by their own admission, has killed over 2,000 people just in the UK. And yet they're still telling us it's safe and effective.
It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
Quite clearly isn't.
And what I've noticed, I mean, I was wanted to ask you guys about obviously doing that amount of research as you've done, and then creating the book. You mustn't sort of, I'm wondering if you've noticed patterns now, because you can see, obviously we haven't gone too deep into it, but you can see how the myth is kept alive, how easy it is, as much as you wouldn't think it would be, but how easy it is to make sure that people don't see all the information that is out there, that they can actually, you can, just the same way you guys gathered enough information to know that this is a load of bollocks, this isn't true, what's going on out there with the medical system. And it's all out there for people to see. You've got, so many doctors now speaking out, people like yourself writing books, but as long as they don't see any of that, they'll carry on in the paradigm that they're in. And so it's, the pattern of the powers that be just making sure that there's enough information out there to keep people baffled or keep them looking the wrong way. And have you noticed that in other sort of industries as well?
Yes, I mean, because our research extended far wider than just the medical side of things. I mean, and that's why in the book we talk about vested interests to a certain extent, because we found that the powers that be, let's call them that, I could use
powers
some
that shouldn't be
more unfavorable
powers
words.
that shouldn't be, absolutely.
Yes, I'm trying to be sort of kind.
Hey, we're hip hop here, man. You can say what you want.
Well, it's just that maybe children listening.
No.
But anyway, all joking apart, so our research had to go in a much wider field, as to what these vested interests could be, both political and financial and pharmaceutical, legal, in fact, even the legal system. And we know from people who've tried to bring cases to court to show just how corrupt the system is, and how people have either been damaged or in some way through drugs and various treatments, and they've always been blocked. There's some quite famous, well-known, people may have heard of people like Michael Obanisia. They may have come across him, and others, but always when it gets to a judge who has to review the case before it gets into court, they just disallow it. Just with a sweep of the hand, they'll just say, we don't think your case has merit. That's all they have to say. Doesn't matter how much evidence you put forward. And I know in one particular case, and it was Michael Obanisia, there was 6 lever arch files, great big thick files, 6 lever arch files of evidence. And the judge just said, well, I don't think your case has merit. And that was it.
Yeah.
And so they stop it going into court, because they know if it gets into court, it will be in the public domain. And there may be some newspapers actually are honest enough to report it because it's in the public domain, and that's the last thing they want. So they just stop it. So the legal system is completely corrupt as well. And these are the things we found.
You said with the wave of the hand.
Yeah,
And you know, they're called the
exactly.
magi, the magistrates, the
Yeah,
magician, you know, and just
yeah,
like that, it disappears. Exactly. That's
yeah,
exactly what I'm talking about, is the fact that this guy comes with, you know, that much information. I've listened to his interviews when he even talked about, look, I've got certain doctors that are willing to come out. I think he said he had people in the press as well that were willing to speak out. And I guess everybody was waiting for what you're talking about, for the magistrate to be like, okay, we'll put this through, and then now it's in the public domain. Now it's
yeah.
actually a fact that they haven't isolated any virus. They, you know, all these different things.
But right, so with that subject there, how come people do? How come they do show pictures of isolated viruses? What are they actually showing then?
Okay.
You know
that-
what?
that's
This
fair
is
enough.
just for the for the audience as well.
And I'll say, just before you answer that, David, and Dawn, I really appreciate you guys, because I was lucky enough that a former friend, I should say now, had a brother that was a virologist, quote unquote virologist. And I got to the part where you said, if you ever meet or know any virologists, ask them these three things. The three things were, do you have the peer-reviewed paper that proves the isolation of a virus? Do you have electronic micrograph? Is that right? Yeah. And then there was a third question as well. And so this was my moment when I was like, okay, well, I could do this. I can actually, because she said, oh, my brother's a virologist, if you have any questions. And so I sent those three questions over, and shaking, thinking, I hope he doesn't come, you know, because I'm still wondering whether what you guys are telling me is true or what, you know. And so then I get sent back this long sort of list of this, that, and the third answering. One was that he'd never, so I also threw in, how come the PCR test invented by Kerry Mullis doesn't do, you know. And then the first thing he said was, I don't know who Kerry Mullis is. So that was already a red flag for me, like, oh, whoa, so you're using these things and you don't know who even made them. So that shows that you probably haven't done enough research on that anyway. Then he sent a paper, like a link to a paper that was claiming isolation, but the paper didn't, it said this is not peer reviewed. And then he sent the electronic micrograph link as well, and it's the same thing. It said it's not peer reviewed. And then obviously hearing more about what they were finding, I think Kaufman did the whole exosome thing. And so from then, that's what I'm talking about, setting me free. I was like, wow, they're not lying. Like, you guys have really done your research. And then he also sent like the assay. It was like a picture of an assay thing. Like, it looked like he just grabbed it off of the Daily Telegraph or something like that. And, you know, so like all these things, I was like, wow, this guy's lying to me. And he doesn't even know what I'm talking about, really. But he's a qualified virologist, you know. But please answer that about what are we seeing then?
Well, the first thing is to remember that virologists are conducting experiments that they were trained how to perform as part of their education. So again, like with doctors, you know, we're not saying that, you know, they're doing anything deliberately, but what they're doing is they're following procedures that they were taught in college, during their training, and they believe that what they are looking at are these things that are called viruses. So they have the terminology, they have all the different jargon, they have their specific procedures. You know, they have a whole list of, you know, you take this, you do this, you add this, you do this particular function, and then when you get to see this, that's what this is. And so that's, I mean, I know that sounds vague, but I mean, you know, depending on what they're actually doing, but it is a procedure that they get to the end, and then they say, oh, this is what I found, and that's my interpretation, or the interpretation of what they've found. So again, it's not they're doing anything deliberately; they're just following laboratory. They're following laboratory experimentation methods, procedures that they have been taught produce something. So it's just, there are lots of parts to the answer for that. I mean, when you say, you know, what are these images? I mean, if you're talking about these wonderful colored images, they are pure CGI. And again, you know, if you look at them, they're all different, and so they can't be the same picture of the same thing, because you know, because they're different pictures, so they can't be the same thing. And again, but they are just CGI. Nobody's ever seen these you know, green things with red spikes on it, whatever it is. Nobody's ever seen those in real life. They do not exist in nature.
So what is it? What are the images that people are seeing when they claim that they've isolated a virus?
You mean these
And it's
coloured
a
images?
No,
No,
the sort of
the
Right, okay.
external
Right, I was gonna say, 'cause
microscope, electron
the electron micrographs,
electron micrographs, yeah, with
Well,
like robotic looking weird spiky things or whatever they show.
yeah, and some of them, yeah, there's all sorts of different shapes that they see. What people have to understand is that whatever you look at through an electron microscope, the procedure to produce that slide is really detailed and complex. And when they've extracted something, a sample from a supposed sick person, and then prepared it, because you can't just take it from the, not like a light microscope, a normal magnifying light microscope, where you can just take a sample of blood, put a smear on a slide, stick it under your microscope and look at it. It's not like that for an electron microscope. You have to do all sorts of things to it and add all sorts of chemicals, some of which are heavy metals. You have to heat it and do all sorts of things, stain it, so that, and then you put it into your electron microscope, which then bombards it with high energy and heat. So what you're looking at, as people are now realizing, there's no relationship whatsoever to what is actually in the human body. And so then they see these little specks, which they then interpret, and that's the important word, they interpret as being a virus, with no proof as to what that speck is, or sometimes, as you say, you see these things like a disc with like little furry edge to it, which they sometimes refer to as a spike protein, that these are spikes. But it's been shown that, if you take a protein, which might under normal circumstances look like a little disc, a plate type thing, and poison it with certain things, which is exactly what they do when they prepare it for an electron microscope image, it will start to decay. And that gives it those little furry spikes around the edges. And so it's part of the process. And it's what the cell biologist, Harold Hillman, has pointed out many times. I mean, he's no longer with us, but he spent 40 years examining cell cultures and things like that. A great guy. And he points out that these things are artifacts, what are called artifacts, i.e. something that gets produced by the procedure you've used. They're not actually real outside of the test. Wow. And this is what we found with the whole of virology, because they are following the same procedure that was done back in 1954 by two doctors called Enders and Peebles. Back in 1954, they were trying to prove that a virus caused measles. Okay. And if you look at that paper, which we have, and others doctors have looked at it too, you'll see that you'll see exactly what procedure they used. And at least they were honest enough in their scientific paper to actually say that the tests they did was inconclusive, and that the cells in the petri dish in their laboratory could have died for other reasons. So let me just explain that a little bit. What virologists do then, 70 years ago, and have continued to do right up to today, is if they take a sample from a supposed sick person, which they think, listen to the words, think or suppose contains a virus, which no one has ever seen, but they think it should be in there. They put it in their petri dish, and then they add antibiotics, they add various other chemicals, they add monkey kidney cells, they add bovine serum, which is actually blood from a baby calf, and they add all these things into their petri dish, and they call that an isolation. Okay, so this is where they start to corrupt the language. Now, anyone who understands the language or looks it up in a dictionary, we as normal people, when you say you've isolated something, you mean you've separated one thing from everything else. When virologists say they've made an isolation, they've actually made a cocktail, which is what I've just described. They've got something something which they think is a virus in a dish mixed in with about 5 or 6 other things, and they call in that an isolation. And then they leave that concoction for anything up to 5 days. Okay. And when they come back to it, they see that all the cells in the monkey kidney cells and the bovine serum, the blood, are all dead. And they go, well, it must be the virus that's killed them all. They never stop to think that the reason the cells will have died is because they've poisoned it with numerous chemicals that they've put in the petri dish, and they've starved it to death over 5 days, because cells will die if they're not fed. But to them, they're just following their procedure, as Dawn said, and they believe that proves that there was a virus in the dish, and therefore then the pharmaceutical companies will take a sample of that and say, we've got the virus, and we'll make a vaccine from it. Okay. Now, what Dr. SYMNNKNA did, who is a trained virologist, he said, look, you guys are completely, this is not scientific. You know, you need to have done a control experiment to prove that what you've got in your dish is actually what you think it is.
Can you explain?
So what he said, well, you've not done it, so I'll do it. And as a trained virologist, he knows exactly what to do. And he published it on the internet. So he took a second petri dish. He put all the same concoction into the second petri dish, except for putting anything that could be considered viral material, anything that could be considered a virus. He left that out, but he put all the other stuff in there and left it for the period up to 5 days. And when he came back, sure enough, all the cells in the monkey kidney cells and the bovine serum had all died. And he said, the reason they have died is because they've been poisoned by the chemicals you've put in there, and you've starved them to death. That's why these cells die. So your experiment, Mr. Virologist, is completely unscientific and proves nothing. The cells die for simple reasons which are nothing to do with a virus. So that's what virologists do, and that's really what Dawn was saying. They're just following a procedure that they've been following for the last 70 years, which doesn't prove anything. In fact, they disprove themselves.
So any paper that somebody gives you that's got the title isolation of whatever it is, you know, I mean, and there are lots of papers that have those titles. The one thing you need to do is look at the methodology and to find out, and that's of course where they put people off. You know, the sort of, you know, general public aren't going to start looking at the papers and reading them and understanding the methodology because of all the jargon. But if you can actually sit there and read that section, and then you find out all the procedures that they have actually conducted to find the so-called virus at the end of it, as David said, you'll find that they're doing pretty much the same thing, and they're just creating a cocktail including poisons, and so they're poisoning and starving, and then they see what they call the cytopathic effects, or CPE. Sometimes they abbreviate it. And so for them it's, you know, yeah, there you are, that's it, you know,
there must be a virus in there.
Yeah, so they work on the assumption. Again, they're working on assumptions that are based on how they were trained. Sorry.
Yeah, what you said there about assumptions, that's exactly it. It's just they've already been told that if you do this, then this should happen. And so they never question, like, yeah, but what if we don't do this, and will it still happen? They just carry on, and then, okay, the book says to do this now, and then we've got the result that it says, so yeah. And that's what it means to be qualified, mother lovers. When they talk about being qualified, getting your degree is to what degree have you been indoctrinated? To what, you're talking about A levels, what level have you been indoctrinated, basically, you know? And you think you're doing, you know, they think, like you said, they don't know that what they're doing is actually.
Yeah.
The other thing on most of the papers, you'll find that the language, they're using words like could be, perhaps, possibly, maybe. And again, it's, you know, it's the kind of thing that you get used to seeing, and then it becomes more obvious. And another thing that you'll almost certainly see at the end of the paper with the conclusion, sometimes they'll say that there might be something that they're not totally sure about, and therefore it needs further investigation. In other words, please give me more funds so that I can carry on doing this work. You know, so it is again about making sure they are able to continue their career doing this kind of research, because they think whatever it is that they're doing has some kind of application.
I feel like you just said. I feel like you just said they're working on something they might not never know nothing about. That's the name of this show. So that's quite
Yes.
And they certainly don't.
Yeah.
They certainly
Well,
don't know anything
again,
about it.
that's why they have to use these words. Well, sort of, it's just all this conditional language, or maybe, perhaps, possibly,
Probable.
theorized, speculate. It's
But we
all
look,
that kind of language. It's
we
amazing how much it is in those papers
Mm.
when you start reading them, and you think, these are papers that are supposed to be giving scientific information, and it's all based on this maybe, possibly, could be, perhaps.
Yeah.
which is totally unscientific. And of course, many of these papers started to come onto the
Sorry, excuse me.
internet, and we used to get lots of links sent to them. And so did like Dr. Tom Cowan and Stefan Lanka and Andy Kaufman. They all got them and looked at them. I mean, I know that Dr. Tom Cowan had a team at one stage. He had a team of 15 people looking at these papers and trying to find any paper that could prove scientifically that a virus or any germ was the actual cause of a disease. And they spent a whole year, 15 people looking at these things, and they couldn't find not one that proved any virus or any germ caused any disease. Which is what we'd found over the 10 years we were looking. And again, Andy Kaufman, he's put a load of stuff on the internet to show what nonsense it is. And so is Stefan Lanka. So, the information's out there. And, virology is a totally, we can say it, and many have said it now, virology is totally unscientific and does not prove that a germ, particularly viruses, cause disease. And that's why there are no scientific papers anywhere in the world that can prove it, because they never go through the basics of true isolation, i.e. separate this thing from everything else, and then genetically characterize it and prove that it actually is the sole cause of the disease you're attributing to it. No one has ever been able to do that, ever, with either a bacteria or a virus. And that's stunning, isn't it? You think, how can you not do those simple things if you're such a believer, Mr. Virologist, Mr. Doctor, whoever you are? If you're such a believer in it, well, just do those simple scientific things, which is you're supposed to do. And they've never done it, ever.
And we're back.
Yeah, mother lovers. Told you it was gonna go deep, man. I told you it was gonna get deep. Some shit you might not never know nothing about. We're after the watershed hours now, innit? So I can say. Yes, man. Hit up the comment section if you want to get the book, if you want to learn more. They have a blog, they have a website. You can hook them up. Hit them up if you have any questions. But I'm telling you, man, set yourself free. Set yourselves free, mother lovers. It's that time. Shout out to the Common Sensors. Big up King Chico, Yamore. Shout out to Vinny B in the building. Really appreciate you hooking this up, man. That was part 1 right there. We're coming back. Right. Let me shout out the CMOS boss. Of course. We got to shout out the CMOS boss, mother lovers.
CMOS boss was there on last Wednesday, wasn't he?
Yeah. We saw him down there. Touraine, shout out to Richie. Saw them down there at Jazz Caf on Wednesday, man. Yeah, it was a good party, man. A lot of people came down that year. You don't get to see often. Sarah Love was down there as well. Yeah, man. But back to this, though. Shout out to the cmosboss.co.uk. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get some quality products, when I'm talking about quality, I'm talking about wild-crafted, not just organic, but wild-crafted, straight from Ireland. Irish moss. You can get bladderwrack, spirulina. Spirulina. You can get yourself some sea salt and kelp seasoning. Wakame, sea spaghetti. Irish seasoning, bruv. And the dose, all these sea vegetables have like a whole bunch of different vitamins and minerals, from vitamin K, E, D, B9, B2, potassium, selenium, iron, magnesium, you know what I mean? All types of fats. Not too much fat, but the right fats. Some sugar, fiber, carbohydrates, So get yourself some proper nourishment, mother lovers. That's all we promote. It's just, you know, keep yourself healthy, man. Health is wealth, as they say. But healthy,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You live a good life then, man. Without health, what else can you do? Do you know what I mean?
all
You're
you've
there
got.
trying to sort yourself out. You spend most of your life trying to sort out your health. What kind of madness is that?
Yeah.
You got to stay balanced, man. Just keep that balance. Whatever you do, keep that balance. Don't overdo it. Do you know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
drinking too much water, you might drown.
Yeah.
So be careful. But hit up the seamossboss.co.uk to get any of these quality sea vegetable products. And make sure when you get to the checkout, you click about 20.
20.
That's about 20.
All in uppercase.
In
capital
uppercase, yeah.
letters.
Capitals. Yeah. Decapitate. Be careful of that word, capital. There's a reason why it's called capitals. You know that, innit? Uppercase. We'd have to
Uppercase.
get into that. Yeah, we'd have to do some kind of a
What
little
do you call it,
presentation. on
uppercase or
that.
capital?
I think it's safer to call it uppercase, but capital is the real word.
That's what I call
Yeah,
it.
that's the rule. It's capital.
Uppercase is modern.
Yeah, that whole you know, the corruption of the language.
I call it little, capital, and joined up writing. That's the 3 types of letters.
Yeah, joined up writing.
Joined up
cursive.
writing.
That's called
what
cursive.
Americans
Yeah.
call cursive.
Yeah.
Joined up writing.
There's a reason why it's called cursive, man. Joined up writing. And I reckon like the reason why we have other names for them is so that it kind of hides. So uppercase is so people don't call it capital because
Yeah.
they might learn about what it really means. And same for cursive.
Yeah.
But I'm sure cursive was the English term.
Cursive with the word curse in there. Curso. Yeah.
They took
Maybe
it over
Latin,
there.
Latinization.
Yeah, of course, it's always Latinized, man. They never
Yeah.
stop with the Latinizations. Yo, so once again, shout out to the seamossboss.co.uk. That's about 20 if you want to get 20% off any of their products, man. Banging products as well, man. I've been loving it. Like my nails, my hair, everything. It's just like, yo, skin. Yeah, man. Telling you. So make sure, bitches and bitchettes. So look, it's time to get back into this.
Yeah.
I've given you lot some time to roll another one.
Make a cup of tea.
You might have noticed I didn't blaze in this interview. There's a reason why, you know what I mean? I had to pay respects there. Shout out to all you lot blazing out there right now. Thinking, right, this is deep. Rewind if you have to, man. And listen again. Take notes if you have to as well. Shout out to the crew locked in. Let's get into part 2. Run, BT. Run, BT. Dawn and David.
Right.
If people want to get an idea, especially what Dawn was talking about in terms of the words, the terms and the words that they use to make it seem, you know, so it plants it into your mind that this is a fact when actually it says probable, possible, likely, we think.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You can go to their website, whatreallymakesyouill.com, and hit the blog. I got to say, man, crazy work on, like amazing work on the blog because it carries on from what the book has done. In terms of, I love the way that you guys always cite like the, you know, the WHO or CDC, like all these governing bodies, NHS, so that people can see how ridiculous it is. Like the authorities that you believe have your best interests at heart are telling you these things, and then even more or less saying to you, like, we don't know what we're talking about here. Just as long as you read the headline and that plants whatever into your mind to make you ill, that's all we need. Or, you know, just so there's so many things you see, but especially with the blog, going through it, I'm always checking it out. And there's always stuff that really is eye-opening and makes you see how ridiculous this whole thing is, you know?
Thank you. The other point you made a sort of a while ago, we went off track talking about the press, but I mean, the media are part of the problem, because obviously they're not allowing any kind of information that questions the mainstream narrative. So, I mean, they're complicit in keeping this going, but also they're complicit in keeping this fear mongering going, because that's what this is all about, to keep people in a state of fear. And obviously they've been using psychologists as well to sort of make sure, you know, keep people at a certain level of fear. And they've succeeded because, you know, people have become fearful, so they're doing things without bothering to think about whether it's the right thing to do. And you know, even now, just to occasionally see people with masks in a street, think, why are you still doing that? But of course it's become a habit, and that's of course one of the other things. But also there are different ideas that are being put out into the mainstream. So there are people that are referred to by a certain label to give them the impression that they're on the opposite side of the mainstream, where they're not completely on the opposite side with regard to everything, because they'll talk about things like, you know, the jabs and how dangerous they are, but they still continue with the idea that there are these invisible agents out there that could get you, which keeps people in fear of all these other you know, so-called diseases that could be caused by these invisible agents. So again, it keeps people in fear, although in a slightly different way. It causes confusion, and of course the general public haven't got the time to dig in. They don't know how to find the information, and so they're confused, and then they'll just default back to the BBC because, you know, it's just there.
No, I stopped drinking water. Stop drinking. What do you mean you stopped drinking water? Oh, there's venom in the water now. Haven't you heard? It's like, what are you talking about?
So,
right, yep.
So there's like
snake venom,
a new polio outbreak that's being talked about on the internet at the moment, which they claim they've obviously tested for it and found polio or whatever.
Good one.
And so back when the polio outbreaks happened before, you know, quote unquote, and they said that it was down to pesticides, or some people say it's down to pesticides, whatever it is. So how come they're still using pesticides
if
there's outbreaks somewhere else? Like what? Because I'm just asking questions that I think some of the audience will probably, you know, these are the sort of questions I come across anyway.
Yeah, well, we do cover polio, of course, in the book. I mean, again, in my lifetime, I can remember when I was at school, you know, certain class members went down with polio. You know, it was a big scary thing, you know, and they used to get put in what was called an iron lung, you know, because it was the paralysis, you know, and if it was severe, of course, people couldn't breathe and could die. So it was a big scary thing. So obviously that was one of the diseases Dawn and I looked at when we were writing our book. And you're quite right, you know, back in the sort of 40s and 50s, when polio was a big thing, we had to look at it, what it was. And yes, we found that because one of the mysteries was that it seemed to be seasonal. You know, the outbreaks of polio seem to be in the sort of summer and autumn times, you know, which no one could quite see. Well, why would this be a seasonal thing? Well, once you looked at all the evidence and found out that because the crops were sprayed first with lead arsenic, and which causes paralysis, and then finally they moved on to DDT, which also causes paralysis. So that's why the crops were sprayed in the summer and the autumn, and then people were eating them. And of course, they were ingesting these highly toxic materials on their food, which was then causing what people were then told was a virus causing this paralysis. So that's what it was. When they stopped using those things, of course, so-called polio started to disappear. But of course, as always, the medical establishment claimed it was their vaccination programs, you know, and we talk about vaccinations quite a lot in the book.
But sorry to interrupt, but the polio was falling before the vaccine came out. They noticed that the polio was going down before then. So
cases.
So how did they not notice that and then, you know, find some other excuse? How did they sort of miss that, do you think?
Well, because, and we show the graphs, you know, you can look at the graphs of all the main diseases, so-called, that people were supposed to get. And when you look at the graphs and the timescales, you'll see that's the case for all of them. They'd all of them had almost fallen to zero before any vaccinations came into effect. So, but of course, most of the general public don't see those graphs, although they are accessible if you know where to look. But most of the public don't see those graphs. So it's easy then for the pharmaceutical driven medical system to be able to claim a victory. You know, oh, it's our vaccinations that have
because they start their graphs just before
Yeah.
the introduction of the vaccine, instead of going far enough back in history, so you can see it's already on its way down. So they start it when the vaccines introduced, so they start their graph there,
so they can manipulate one of the X or the Y to make it look like the time scale is shrunken or extended or whatever.
Deception.
Like, you know, remember what Al Gore did with Inconvenient Truth?
Yes, the hockey stick. The other thing with what they allege to have found in sewage, apparently they say they found the virus, but I mean, again, first of all, I'd say, why were they looking? Because apparently they'd eradicated polio from the UK in 2003, so why are they looking 20 years later? I would suggest it's to keep the fear-mongering going. Whether they actually did some kind of investigation and do this typical virology experimentation where they get these cytopathic effects and just go, oh, that's polio. Who knows what they actually did to find the virus? Who knows? But again, I'd ask, well, why were they looking? But again, you know, they've been putting out stories about hepatitis and monkeypox and all sorts of different stories, all sorts of different names.
But the thing is, they're trying to get, and they're succeeding in getting a vaccination program going for polio. I was talking only a few days ago to relatives who live in London who are bought into this whole nonsense and were considering, well, not considering, were planning to have their 3-year-old vaccinated against polio. So I've tried to put them right about the true history of it, and that it's not a disease. There's never been proved to be a viral infection. They've never isolated a virus that causes polio. And in fact, in 1977, the inventor of the polio vaccine, Jonas Salk, actually is on record as publicly admitting that his vaccine was the major cause of polio in the United States.
Oh, so he admitted it, yeah.
He admitted it,
wow.
1977. So, you know, but the general public don't get to hear these things. Know. But it is on public record.
Yeah.
And I think we mention it in our book, but we certainly give the details about polio. And none of these things, this is what we look for. Could we find any proof that any of these deadly diseases that we're told, or what people have either been paralyzed by or dying from, can we find scientific evidence that proves what is causing them? Is it a germ? And it never is a germ. There are always, like the DDT and lead arsenic, there are always, and it's nearly always, toxicity of some sort combined with poor nutrition. And that's why you get many of these things in the so-called third world countries where these diseases still exist in some cases. And when you investigate the living conditions of people, you find that they're poor, they're undernourished, and they're exposed to toxic material of one sort or another, quite often from either industry or from what's being sprayed, because they're given, in some places, still using DDT, you know, which has been banned in the rest of the world, but some of these, as I say, so-called third world countries still get it dumped on them, literally, and then wonder why there's a rise in paralysis in these areas.
And of course they rename some of these some of these things as well.
Yes,
to other types of
exactly.
Like polio got renamed to 3 different things.
It was acute flaccid paralysis or something like that.
Yes, and acute flaccid myelitis. But apparently there's a whole load of other.
It's crazy.
Guillain-Barré syndrome, which quite often happens after people have been jabbed. So you know,
so
that's interesting.
These are some of the other tricks that they play, as you quite rightly say. They change the name and then say, "Look, we've cured that, but there's this other disease now that you've got to be jabbed against." And these are the tricks they play on the public.
Or they just say it's down to a congenital or a genetic disease instead, so they can
that's another
not needing a vaccine. It's something that just happened to someone.
Yeah, it's just
yes,
bad
that's
luck.
another, and
It's
that's
your
another
genes.
problem.
Yeah.
And you know, the whole idea that anything is caused by your genes, you know, problems with your genes, again, that's a whole other area.
The
but
body attacking itself, anything like that. Yeah.
Autoimmune diseases. This is
it's kind
another
of weird.
favorite one.
It's kind of weird. Your body does everything else that it's trying to do. Like, you know, if you drink too much water, or, you know, it's going to pee some out. If you're eating, it's obviously going to get rid of it in that way. If you're hot, it's going to sweat. But all of a sudden, it's attacking itself. Now it's attacking you for some reason. But then, how would you explain self-hatred? How would you explain then the genetic thing? Because I have looked at it and thought, okay, I see how that's a misnomer. That doesn't make sense. But then I do have family that have. It's like mum had some brain problem, and now it seems that, you know, they've been told that it could be passed on to the children, but now it seems like one of the children may have it as well. So how would we explain that that isn't to do with genetics? Would it be to do with toxicity factors as well? Maybe the child grew up.
Common exposures.
It could be
living in the same environment, living in having the same habits. Yes, but again, there's no way of knowing. But also there is the other aspect of being told that it runs in the family can actually create, because you can actually create things, you know, it's, you know, placebo nocebo effect. You can actually create things through your own beliefs and ideas. You know, you can actually manifest things, make them happen, which is again part of what we call the kind of stress that, you know, people can and have been known to create all kinds of problems in their body just by believing that they can get something. And again, we've had the opposite, where people who used to believe in germs and always, you know, what they thought they would be getting, what was going around, when they stopped believing in it, they stopped having those symptoms in common. So again, you can flip it either way, that if you stop believing that you're going to get something, then you can actually stop that from happening. So, but I'm not saying that is the case, but there are so many different possibilities that we can't answer that question. We can make some suggestions.
But the genetic thing is important, because, and it is something we're spending more time, but from what we found, that you are not a prisoner of your genes, which is what we'd always been told, you know, that if it's in your genes, you've inherited it and you could be stuck with it, you know, and people have done all sorts of drastic things because they thought breast cancer was in the family.
Diabetes,
and we've seen cases of young women having breasts removed, even though they hadn't got cancer, but they thought they might get it because either their mother or their grandparents had it, and they were so afraid. And this is a terrible thing. And yet when you look into genetics, you realize that they're changing totally their ideas about it, and realizing that genes are flexible. They're not fixed. And so depending on your environment and even your beliefs, genes are not fixed. So you're not a prisoner of your genes, but what you believe is very important. Even the medical establishment knows the power of the mind, and they use the placebo effect in drug trials, you know, where one group of people have their new drug and the other group has a placebo, which is just a sugar pill, for want of a better word. Obviously, they don't know that they've just been given a sugar pill, but that group who've just had a sugar pill can exhibit amazing symptoms. You know, if they think they've had a chemotherapy drug, you know, in the records, it shows they even exhibit hair falling out and things like that, when all as they've had is a sugar pill. So the placebo effect is very powerful, and doctors know this. They even use a term of dying of the diagnosis. You know, they know that. Yes, exactly. We came across only the other day, actually, one of the most amazing cases that I've ever come across. I'll just, to give people an idea of just how powerful the mind is. And this was a case from in the British records from when they were in India. In the 1930s, and this case was in, I think it was 1936, where, I'll keep it brief, there was this man who'd murdered somebody and he was going to be hanged, but the British said in the area that they would asked the villagers if they could do some medical experiments on the man, that he would die as a result of their experiments, but that this would save the family, the man's family, the embarrassment of a hanging. And the man was going to die, but it would be useful to medical science if the villagers allowed them to do what they wanted to do.
Jesus.
Anyway, what they did is they had this man. They told him that they were actually going to conduct an experiment on him, that they were actually going to bleed him to death, okay, or that he would die, but it would be painless, okay. And then they strapped him to a bed, blindfolded him.
Good.
They made incisions in his ankles and wrists, but not incisions that would actually have cut an artery, but he didn't know this. And they had connected to the bedposts little bottles of water, which slowly dripped into a bowl, which he could hear.
Oh my days. So he thought that was his blood.
And he thought it was his blood. They even went to the extent that the doctors surrounding the bed slowly talked to one another in lowered voices. So it gave him the impression that he was passing away. And sure enough, he died. And yet he'd lost no blood at all, but he believed that he was bleeding to death. And that's in the records. And that's the most weird one that I've ever come across. We've come across some weird ones that was purely in this case would have been called the nocebo effect, i.e. an adverse effect from your beliefs. So it was purely his beliefs that killed him.
That's like the stigmata women as well, that bled out of their palms and their eyeballs, thinking that they were emulating the wounds of Christ. Yeah. When it turned out that Christ had been nailed through his wrists instead, but they'd been bleeding through their palms. So
the mind
manifesting wounds on the body.
And
but
again,
it's
voodoo,
strong.
yeah.
It's strong. What you're saying about basically the mind, you know, how they can just plant these things in your mind and then your body does the rest. And that even goes with the idea of treatments. Like, we know the word ment means mind. So they're just treating your mind. Here, I'll take this and your mind will feel better. Or, you know, it's not actually doing anything that's helping your body. It just goes to show how powerful the human body is. And actually all we're doing is our best to aid the body to do the healing. Like the plaster doesn't do the healing. Whether you use TCP, or whatever it is you put on a cut, that's not doing the healing. It's actually the body doing it. And so you obviously have to feed the body with the right nutrients.
It's the body and mind as one thing.
Yes.
That's the distinguishing between the two is the problem.
Yeah. That's it. Holistic, right?
Yeah.
So I know we haven't got much time left, right? You guys have to go. But I wanted you to just touch on, because obviously for a lot of people, there are different things, whether it be measles, chicken pox, or for me, there was one thing I was really questioning was then if there are no viruses that are actually killing people, then what was the whole thing about the history with American Indians and Europeans going over there with chicken pox and giving it to them? What did they say, by the blankets?
The
two
blankets.
things.
Yeah, the blankets were later.
That was in North America.
That was in North America.
There was in North America. There's the story, which we did investigate, where the British were supposed to have given blankets to the Indians, which were contaminated with smallpox.
Yeah,
that's the story. And we did investigate that, and I'm pleased to say that is complete. Well, it was untrue for two reasons. One is it never historically actually happened. It's one of these urban myths. And secondly, of course, knowing that there is no germ that causes the disease called smallpox, then they couldn't have given them infected blankets anyway. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the other part, which people often get confused about, is what happened in South America when the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors, went across to South America. And apparently with the diseases that they carried with them on the ship, this is what we're told, infected all the inhabitants of South America with things like smallpox and flu and all of these other things, which eventually wiped them all out. That's the stories we were told at school. But when we investigated this, because we were well into finding out there was no such thing as infectious diseases. So we thought, well, what happened? You know, it's quite obviously stuff happened. What was it? And cutting a long story short, we came across an American historian called Dr. David Stannard, who wrote a book, I think it was called The American Holocaust, which anyone interested in history I recommend. We don't agree. He still thinks about germs, so but he's not a doctor in that sense. But great historian, and he paints a very good picture of what actually happened. And cutting a long story short, the conquistadors were extremely barbaric. The only reason they were going across from Spain was for gold. You know, that was their mission, was for gold and silver, precious metals. And when they got over there, I mean, all the people were perfectly healthy. And there was nothing to do with them transmitting diseases. As we've pointed out, if the conquistadors on their boats were already suffering from smallpox, then they would have died on the boats, because it's, you know, it's not just a few days journey in those days, it was weeks, you know. So people would have died on the boats. They'd never have got to South America. And some people then say, oh, well, they were perhaps immune. Well, if they were immune, then they wouldn't have been carrying the germs, would they? So they couldn't have transferred them to somebody. You know, you can't have it both ways. So, and because from our point of view, knowing there is no such thing as an infectious germ, we knew that there was something else. And sure enough, when we looked at the history of it, of what actually went off, and there's lots of drawings and eyewitness accounts, because some Catholic priests went across with the conquistadors, and there are some records of what they saw, and they were just slaughtering the people. They just wanted the gold. They were slaughtering the people, bearing in mind that the conquistadors had armor, they had steel weapons, the people over there didn't, and they were friendly people. They thought these white men coming across were friendly and advanced and would teach them things, rather than murdering them. They enslaved them and made them work in the mines. They didn't even bother to feed them, you know, so they starved to death. They didn't last very long. They died. And because they thought, well, the conquistadors, that is, just thought we'll just get some more. They had so little respect for the local populace. They even had, this is all in the records, they even had armored dogs, which they used to track down these people and either kill them or savage them so that they could be captured. So the people were terrified, naturally. So they were driven off their lands because they could no longer feed themselves. So they died of starvation and malnutrition, you know, and the skin eruptions that result from lack of nutrition and fear and all of the things that we've talked about, the 4 factors, you know, this is what was happening. And there's lots of cases of the local inhabitants committing suicide rather than being captured by these barbaric conquistadors. So over a period of something like 30 years, they'd wiped out almost the entire population, native population of South America and the Caribbean islands. Something like 50 million people died out in those years. And this is the real Holocaust. This is the real tragedy of South America. Nothing to do with germs. But that's a nice cover story rather than admitting
this is the thing.
There was a bunch of barbarians that went over there, killing the population and stealing their resources.
And wasn't there
much
also
like today
something to do with them? They had them digging as well. Like, were they drinking out of water wells that were just on the side of the road or something like that? So it was dirty water, as well as they were digging for. They had them digging for gold, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
they were there for gold, and that was also they're breathing in all of this. Some places they're digging, it wasn't gold that was. You know, that they were finding, it was whatever kind of toxin that is in the rock, and they're breathing all that in as well.
Yeah, quite often gold is associated with cinnabar, which is the mercury, the sort of natural ore of mercury. So again, yes, they would have been exposed to mercury, so that would have created all
deadly.
kinds of really toxic.
So would you have seen the conquistadors dying of some of the same things, or?
Well, they wouldn't be working in the mines.
And they were eating.
But they would have the same food. How would they be getting their food off of boat, or I mean, they must run out of food at some point.
Well, don't forget a lot of the stuff, in South America, a lot of the stuff, fresh fruit and that all grows freely on the trees. And once you've
in the tropics, there's it's food all the year round.
Yeah, and there's animals, of course. They would kill animals, so they would have a diet of fresh meat and fruit. So they were having quite a good diet. And as Dawn said, they weren't working down the mines, whereas the local inhabitants who they'd enslaved were getting no food. And if they got water, it was contaminated. They didn't get any food at all. They literally starved to death. They just worked them to death. And there is even an edict from the King of Spain at the time, when he saw what was going off. I mean, said to them that they'd got to start treating their prisoners a little better, because, eventually, if you just keep letting them starve to death, we're not going to have anyone to work in the mines. So they're purely thinking about their gold. They weren't thinking really about the true welfare of the local inhabitants. They just saw them as a commodity to get and extract gold and silver. And that was the only reason the King of Spain sort of said, you need to feed them something. You can't just give them nothing to eat. That's we're just going to lose our slaves. But as I say, when you look at the true records of what really went off, it's very different to what we were taught at school. And the cover story of, they all died, it's really unfortunate, but they just didn't have any immunity to the diseases that the conquistadors had. It's just nonsense. There is no scientific evidence to back that up. It's the pure barbarity and murder and slaughter.
Especially as there weren't any windows back then, so the whole thing of like leaving your window open to let the virus blow out, they wouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, I'm sure you don't. I'm sure you don't believe that, but
they're telling all the grannies leave the window open, leave the windows open. Remember last winter, the winter before, just leave all the windows open, wear a mask indoors,
so
don't have anyone come in
the freezing cold through winter with all the windows open. Yeah,
it's crazy, man.
Then they get ill.
Well, we've seen adverts, haven't we, on the British television, where they started putting out these, and you saw all these black swarms going through the room and out the window.
Crazy, man.
Unbelievable.
That is,
what the BBC has been putting out.
I mean, and once you've got
impartial BBC,
impartial. I think I call them the They Live glasses. You remember They Live? That's obviously been quite a movie that a lot of people are saying we should watch over the last few years. And it's like that. Once you got the They Live glasses on, all of this stuff, like virtually everything on TV, you can see what the propaganda is. You can see the idea behind why they're putting this image out there. Why, but it just, it's you do go a little bit like, what the hell? How do you two sort of keep your sanity with all of this going on? And obviously.
Don't watch the BBC.
We don't watch we don't listen to the news, because we know it's just nonsense, and dangerous nonsense at that. We don't listen to the government, because
occasionally dip in, because sometimes, we do have to keep up with
to
the propaganda that's coming out, because people ask us questions. But
providing the anti-venom.
No, there's nothing. Sorry.
You guys provide the anti-venom. They put out all this toxic whatever in the news, and then I just go to your blog just to make sure, I don't need to worry. Yeah, this is what it is. So, you're providing the anti-venom. And the only way you could do that is to find out what the venom is. So, makes sense.
Yeah, but because we know there's nothing to it, we know there's nothing to fear. So we're not drawn into the fear part of it. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of people are. Yeah. They'll see the headline and, it's something else to worry about.
And so that's why it's important. It's why it's important to stop once and for all this whole fear of germ theory. People need to realize that it is called germ theory, i.e. something that's never been proven, and it hasn't ever been proven. I mean, the clue is in the words germ theory.
Well, the girl that used to be my friend, whose virologist brother I spoke to, when I said to her it's a theory, it's germ theory, she the first thing she said is, I don't think you know what theory means in a scientific sense, And I was like, wouldn't it be the same thing? Wouldn't theory mean, we think this is possibly,
But there's also confusion with germ, because there are such things as bacteria that are, not good to eat. It's not good to eat.
No,
It's
No.
a mistaken idea. It's a mistaken idea. Bacteria are living things.
Yeah, that's what I'm
which
saying.
live in and on our body, but
Yes.
these are
But they're
necessary.
not harmful either.
They're not harmful. These are necessary. In fact,
But
without
what about,
them,
say, like E. coli or something?
E. coli, you can have E. coli and be healthy.
yeah,
So if you're healthy and you've got E. coli, then it cannot be something that causes disease. Otherwise, you would have to have that disease.
And
Because
what
if
about-
something causes something, it would have to be the case all the time.
But
it
what-
can't just
yes,
be
I agree with
some
that.
of the time.
I agree with that. But what about eating, say,
Bad meat.
bacteria from someone's rectal passage?
Well, it's not the bacteria that's the problem. It's the fact that what you're talking about is waste product. So it's been
Yeah.
decomposed and it's no longer in a form that would be considered useful to the
Digestible,
body.
yeah.
So the body will reject it. Nothing to do with the bacteria. And if bacteria are there, they're already decomposing or helping to decompose it. So and break it down into its natural components for recycling out there in the environment, because that's what they do in nature.
When food, yeah, you see it in the forest, don't you? You know, bacteria decomposing fallen trees and leaves, and fungi do the same thing. And if you look, and you may still find it on the internet, if you look, use your search engine to find out what, let's take meat, flesh, what does it break down to when it starts to deteriorate? And you'll see that the actual chemical components it breaks down into are very toxic. So while it was in a fresh state, you know, if you're a meat eater and it's in a fresh state and you eat it, you'll be fine. But if you leave it, and it's starting to go rotten and starts to break down, and the bacteria are doing their job of breaking down, decomposing material, you'll find that meat, any product, will, as it starts to decay, breaks down into its component parts, and those component parts are toxic. And it's this that makes people ill through what's called food poisoning or something like that. It's not the bacteria. The bacteria will always be found there because they're doing their job of decomposing and breaking down the material. And it's as simple as that. And this is why we go to great pains to explain what is happening in the body, what is happening when food decays, so that people can understand it's not the germs. No one has ever, again, I come back to what I said earlier, no one has ever proved that a bacteria of any sort is the cause of any disease, you know, or these things virus. I mean, these particles, let's give them their correct name, which are got misnamed viruses, are not living things. They're just cellular debris. When cells break down in the human body, and that's what these little dots are that they see under their electron microscope, they're just particles of cellular debris. And this happens all the time in the human body. So you've got two different things there. You've got bacteria, which are living things and live in and on the body. We have millions of them and are essential. We wouldn't even be able to digest our food without the amount of bacteria that we have in our gut.
Many say there are trillions in the body.
But these particles, which they've misnamed virus, because that comes from the Latin, and its original meaning was poison or noxious substance, nothing to do with some particle. But these particles are not living things. So the medical establishment have never been able to explain how something that they have to recognize and do recognize as a non-living particle can somehow become alive through some mysterious process and reproduce itself and travel through the air and infect someone else and then reproduce itself in their body and make them ill. They've never been able to demonstrate that.
It knows what time it is. Oh, wait, it's not 6 o'clock yet, so you're all right. You're safe now. Hey, wait, remember they said like black people were 4.5 whatever % likely to catch COVID. Wait, no, you're white. You're cool. Carry it. You're like, as if this little particle has got a brain like that. It's crazy.
And the ridiculous nature, I found one out of all of the ridiculous measures that they wanted people to abide by was when they eventually said you could go back into restaurants, providing you wore a mask when you entered the restaurant, but you could take your mask off once you sat down. But if you stood up again to go to the toilet, you got to put your mask back on. Like these particles knew this. They knew when you were sitting down. They knew they couldn't attack you while you were sitting down. As soon as you stood up, that's when they could get you.
It's because they clean the tables.
You know, it's just
they know the tables are clean. They don't know the
people fell
clean.
for it. People fell for it, didn't they? They were doing it, you know, and restaurant owners were doing. You know, you just think, come on, you're not using your brains here, guys. You know, you're not using a bit of critical thinking. You've got to see. And then we even had Boris Johnson telling us that the virus particles became more virulent after 10 o'clock at night. You know, you think, well, how does that work?
Well, they're out there partying now. What are you up to? Oh, we're gonna go infect these lot over here. What you lot? We'll meet you lot over by. You know, it's crazy. What else did we have? Matt Hancock, when he's like, "Hey guys, these dogs can sniff out COVID." They had these sniffers. They were like, these dogs are gonna be. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, whoa. You know, what does that mean then? Because this dog now is just gonna sniff you out. Go, hey, yep, he's got it, and you're like, no, I'm fine. Yeah, but you're asymptomatic. There's so many. Even that was crazy as well. They had us believing that you're not sick, but you're sick. Like what? Wait, I feel fine.
So you have to have a test. You have to have a test to tell you if you're sick or not.
That's how deadly it is.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all part of making people stop trusting themselves, you know, and it's putting everything out to these authority figures or whatever, you know, so you can't trust yourself. You go, well, I feel fine. No, you're not. You know, you have to have a test to find out if you are fine.
And the best of it is this whole asymptomatic nonsense goes against their own guidelines. It goes against Koch's postulates, which says, quite in his first postulate, which is supposed to be one of their gold standards, you know, that the germ should always be found on the sick person and should never be found on the healthy person. So how you can, the asymptomatic meant you're carrying the germ, but you're not sick. So they go against their own guidelines. And this just shows again how much nonsense they're prepared to put out in order to bamboozle the public and keep people in fear. It's just utter nonsense.
I think it's beautiful that you said about us trusting they made it so we can't even trust our own bodies. I think we should segue into this because, I know I really appreciate you guys taking the extra time as well to spend with us because we're a little bit late with this. But, man, it's been amazing talking to you. You mother lovers out there locked in, better make sure you go and get this book. Go and check out their blog if you don't believe me, whatreallymakesyouill.com. The book is What Really Makes You Ill, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong. And trust me, once you get into it, you can't stop reading. It's one of those sort of things. But Dawn and David, I want you to help me out because I try and speak to, we've got friends obviously that think we're a bit crazy because they haven't seen the information that we've seen. So we're always trying to find different ways that we can try and break down to them that, you don't have to worry, that your body is way more powerful than you've been taught. And so Dawn mentioned about, them not allowing us to sort of understand how our bodies work and how powerful they are. So I say to people, I try and give them these little, I say to them, look, you get dust in your eye, what happens? Your eye usually waters. You cover your eye, it waters, gets the dust out. Did you have to think about that? Yes or no? You didn't. Same thing with your throat. You might get a little bit of dust in your throat. What happens? You cough it out, and did you have to think about that? No, you get it in your nose. Same thing. Dust, what happens? You sneeze it out. If you eat something bad, what happens, Dan? You know about this.
It comes out somehow.
Yeah, it comes out either, you vomit or you excrete it out. So these are all things that you don't have to tell your body to do this. It does it naturally. And so it should show you how powerful it is, And then I got into the idea about the skin. Like, obviously, we look at our skin and we don't realize that this is actually here to protect us. It's to keep everything out. As soon as you cut your skin, what happens? It bleeds. Does it bleed in? No, it bleeds out. So it's trying to keep stuff out. What happens after bleeding? It will scab up to carry on keeping things out and then heal up as skin. So this is why they have to come with this long-ass needle and try and plunge it all the way in to get whatever they want. The more we start understanding that the body is powerful and all we have to do is keep it in a state of balance. What's the word?
Homeostasis.
Stasis. As long as we keep it in that on that plane where it can function well enough, keep it hydrated enough, enough nutrients, then you know your body will do the work.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you could add to it to help us sort of, you know, set some of our friends free?
Well, I mean, you've covered pretty much all that thing, really. As I say, natural health is just that, natural. It's very easy, and you only have to look at those 4 factors that we talked about. You know, feed yourself properly, avoid toxic materials, be careful of what you put in and on your body, and trust your body. You know, the symptoms you get, there are not lots of different diseases. There are just groups of symptoms, and they are healing symptoms. They're, you know, so if you get inflammation or you get your mucous membranes working, all of these things, you know, are where the body is healing itself. And so the last thing you want to do is do something that's going to suppress those symptoms. You know, your body knows what it's doing, and don't get in its way. But unfortunately, the medical establishment doesn't understand this because they weren't taught this way. And the pharmaceuticals companies, it's in their interest to intervene to sell their products, which you don't need. And in fact, as we've talked about, iatrogenesis will actually make you ill. And you don't need it. So health is natural. Pay attention to the 4 factors that we talk about, and you'll be fine. You know? And
remember that the factor of your mind as well, the role it plays. So again, don't allow yourself to be drawn into fear mongering, because that can have detrimental effects on your health as well.
Don't listen. You know, if you can spend as little time as possible listening to what the mainstream media put out, because nothing they're going to tell you is true. You know, the newscasters, they're just reading a script. They don't know. They don't do any research. The people that run the show, okay, they know very well what's going off. They perpetrate. There is a crime being perpetrated against humanity at the moment.
Yeah, big time.
And people need to be aware of this. This is not an accidental thing.
No.
So we have to protect ourselves. As I'm talking about humanity as a whole, we have to protect ourselves. And the way to do that is to educate ourselves as to what is really going off. And their mode of attack at the moment is through health. And that's why we've concentrated on advising people what we found out over over 10 years now, but 10 years of research went into the book. So and it's solid, you know, no one has ever been able to contradict it or say that we're wrong.
They've tried.
So we know it's solid.
They've tried.
And it will give people the information they need to make sensible, informed decisions about their own health. And that's really what we try to do all the time.
Man, I have to thank you guys so much for making sure. Making sure that at least some of us, you know, like is one thing I felt it was brave for you guys to put so much effort into this book and put it out, knowing that there are going to be people out there that are going to try their best to devalue you, to say this, that, and the third about you, because it's not, this book is not in their best interest. You know, it's not going to do anything for their pockets. Also, you're promoting something. You know, a lot of people will be like, oh, they're trying to make money off of this book. But no, you're actually saying, look, get this information, do more research, like to make sure you know that what we're saying is not a load of rubbish. And then you'll understand that you don't have to buy any of these tablets. You don't have to pay for any medical products. The only thing you got to worry about is a major emergency. And then you go and see them. But as well as that, you're equipped with enough information to say like, no, I don't want none of that. Don't inject me with that. Don't touch me with that, you know. And you get in and get out as quick as possible. So for me, like I said, setting people free is what you guys are doing, and we really appreciate that, because not many people have been brave enough at all to let alone do their little videos and whatnot, but to put so much effort into a book. And I want to ask about the timing as well, because it was yeah, have you been asked about that already? Like,
oh yeah,
this book seemed to have come out just as everyone was going crazy with illness and whatnot, and for me, I was a bit worried, obviously, with the whole thing that happened with me with TB. I was still wary of people getting colds and sneezing, and you know, I'd always stay away from someone if they were, because I just felt like, oh, I don't want to go through any of that again. And then I went and did the Sebi diet, Dr. Sebi. I've heard you guys talk about him.
Yeah.
And my friend put me onto him, so I learned about that and alkalizing the system. And then I didn't realize until about 7, 8 years later that I haven't been ill for ages. I hadn't had a sore throat, which I used to get a lot from, you know, being an MC. I wasn't getting the spots that I used to get because switching my diet, drinking water, and just all that sort of thing. But you know, then this comes along, and then it made sense why I was like, wow, that's it. It is to do with the nutrition and your environment and how you're feeling and all of these sort of things. But I just couldn't believe how it came out just as all of this was happening. What was that like for you, and why? How comes it came out then?
Well, exactly. I mean, we've learnt enough, as I said earlier, have written a book about the nature of reality. So we know quite a bit about how reality works, which is, of course, another subject altogether. And it's quite a mystery. It's not like what people think it is. So we know that nothing happens by coincidence. There is meaning and purpose to everything we do. I'm talking about everybody, you know, there's no such thing. So, you know, we were writing our book and it just so happened that it was ready and published at Christmas 2019. And of course, within a week or so, craziness hit the world, didn't it? And lots of people said, oh, it's really fortuitous that your book came out. We said, well, yes, it is. But there's a purpose to this. We didn't know. No one had ever heard of, you know, all the stuff that we've been told now. No one heard about that. But of course, it doesn't detract from our book because we show that germs don't make you ill. And it doesn't matter what name they put on it, the germ. That's not what's making you ill. It's these other factors. And so, yeah, we believe it was meant to be, of course. And it's all the part that we've are playing in this this event. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. Is the you know, and we're all playing a part. You know, you guys are playing your part in getting the information out there. We're playing our part, and it's all about, I truly believe, without getting into the depths of the nature of reality too much, you know, there is a great awakening for humanity that's in force at the moment.
I think so as well.
And this whole fakery that's been going off has woken more people up than ever before. There are more people, we know, because I mean, our book sells into 15 different countries around the world. So we get, and it's been translated into French, Dutch, and it's been translated into Japanese, would you believe? So people are interested and are waking up all over the world and realizing there's a big problem with everything they've been told. So this is great. And this is what it's all about, is to wake people up so that they can take back their freedom, if you like, which has been stolen from them through these various methods, whether it's through the health, which has been making people ill and killing them for centuries, to take back their health freedom and to realize that they can then ask questions about, as we've said, the banking system, which is a big farce, you know, which forces people into debt needlessly, the legal system, which is again a corrupt system, which is designed to protect the elitists, the globalists, protect their interests against the rest of humanity. And so it goes on. And these are the things that people are now starting to relook at, as we did, and find out that everything they've been told about these things is not true. And so they can find out the truth, and all of this, as someone once said, the truth will set you free. And we have our part to play in giving people that truth, as do you.
You two, I've got to say, man, that's some gangster business right there. That's, you know, to take on, because it is that. It's a colossal thing that you're taking on, and but it's working. You know, to hear that the book is being translated in French, Japanese, like that's exactly what needs to be done. And I've thought about, like, how do you get this info to people all around the world like that? But it's just going to keep spreading, you know, like it's just going to keep spreading, and more of us are going to be more aware of that. The most important thing for us right now is our health. Without the health, you're not going to be able to do anything else much. Once we understand, oh, this is as simple as it is for me to stay healthy, now we can move on to this whole legal side and, you know, all the other frauds that are going on. But I think you're right, David. There is definitely an awakening happening. I'm getting to speak to more people now than before about this sort of thing. You know, over the last sort of 2 years, there are a lot of people still scared to speak on it. They may have had the jab or whatever, but I think they're still waking up to the reality of it all. And it can only keep, you know, snowballing.
Yeah, definitely. So
Amazing,
that's what
man.
gives us the hope. We know that this is a great chance for humanity, a chance they've never had before. As we say, whenever you look back in history, you see that there's always been small groups of people with all the money and the armaments that have oppressed everyone else. And it's been like that wherever you look in history. And it's like that now. But the times are changing where the people are realizing this. And so they're going to take that power back to themselves where it should be with the people. And I'm not talking about armed insurrection. There is a change in consciousness, and that's what will set people free. And as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, just don't take part in the lie. That's all you need to do. Just don't take part in the lie.
Great,
and
man.
if everyone did that, it would be over very, very quickly.
Thank you so much, Dawn and David, man. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Hope I pressed the right button. Yeah, drop a bomb.
Oh, it's the long one.
Is that the long one? That's the Houses of Parliament. There you go. CDC, WHO. There you go. No, we really appreciate it. And listen, so everybody, make sure you get the book. What Really Makes You Ill. Check out the website as well, just in case you're still not. I don't know. Yeah, you're listening to us. Like, people know that I'm not about the BS. Like, I'm just a straight talker. Big heart. Everyone says this, that, and the third. And I know a lot of you lot have thought, right, is Mike's crazy talking all this talk? But the only way you'll find out is if you actually look at the information yourself. Me saying it, Dawn saying it, David saying it, Dan saying it, that shouldn't be the reason why you believe it. It should be because you know it for yourself. And the only way you'll know it for yourself is when you actually start looking at it. Like, break free from the fear, the chains of fear. Start looking at the information and understand that you're not going crazy. And actually, things are that simple. And yes, the world is that messed up. It's been all these evil entities have been around for eons. You know, they work through generations. So you just got to understand that that's what it is. But you are armed. You're ready for whatever comes, you know. And so I think that's really important. And I want to thank you both again for coming through to talk about some stuff that we might not never know nothing about. We'd love to have you back if that would be possible, to go into the state of reality, because that it just sounds like that's something else that people might not never know nothing about, and they need to as well.
Yeah, we'd love to come back and talk to you. Definitely.
That'd be beautiful. Definitely, man. Thank you. And shout out to Vinny B as well for making this happen, man. That guy's a legend. He's another he's another gangster, man, like reality gangsters. There's got to be a name. We got to come up with a name for this new breed of people coming out and really just speaking about reality, not truth, not fact. It's reality is what is, you know.
We say as our subtitle, reality is stranger than you can possibly imagine. Yeah, it really is when you start to look at it. But it's a good thing. It's a liberating thing. Like knowing the truth about health. When you know the truth about what this reality is and what we are as human beings, and that there is purpose, you know, we're not insignificant. We're not just some biological accident. When people know this, it starts to empower people. So that's another story. We can talk about that.
I'm all salivated now, but I've got to lick my chops. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's crazy, man.
Pleasure.
That's Dawn Lester, David Parker, authors of What Really Makes You Ill, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong, Mother Lovers. Make sure you get that book. Trust me, man. It's not, it's an easy read, actually, but not something you just like skim past, and you're going to keep going back to it. It'll be like a kind of like a Bible in a way, because there'll be things you'll be questioning, and then you'll go, oh, let me look at what they said about that. And then let me check that what they said was actually, and then you're like, whoa, okay, that makes sense, you know. And there were loads of other people talking the same talk that I think definitely need more of light shined upon them as well, because what they're doing for humanity feels like it's never really been done before, you know, in our lifetime anyway. So yes, thank you for coming through, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks a lot. All right.
Thank you both. Thank you.
I don't know if it's...
Bang.
Yeah.
Back in the room.
Back in this mother lover. Yo, that was Dawn and David, man. Got to thank them a lot for coming through.
Yeah.
Blessing us with some knowledge.
That was
took you lot there,
amazing.
boy. Took you lot there. That's what we do right here, man. Each and every Wednesday, try our best. And shout out to Vinny B for helping us make that happen, man. For me, that was definitely a special one because, you know, I got to speak to the people that really kind of open the doors to a whole nother side of this world where you're like, wow, if that can happen, you know, what else?
From right back at the beginning of all this stuff, you know, they were sort of like that weird couple that you just saw on lots of stuff, and it was like they were really sort of out of the ordinary in a way, but they're really ordinary, but it was out of the ordinary for everything that was going on. Is these people just calmly sitting and explaining what's going on, really calmly, quietly, both in front of one microphone, no flashiness, you know. So it was,
there books behind them.
You couldn't miss them. There was just like, because a lot of characters came out of this whole thing, didn't they? You know,
yeah, for sure.
And they was one of the sort of characters that came out of it in a way. So it was really good to like finally sit down with them.
Yeah, for sure. And it was enough of the people that, in my mind, you know what I mean? Like I say to people, man, like hip hop, at least it must have at least taught you, you know what I mean? That code. There's a code. Like people talk about the code of the streets. It's the same type of code where you kind of get who is real and who isn't after a while, just by their mannerisms, just by the way they might dress, the way they might talk, if they're a bit too smooth, if they're a bit, you know, all these different things. And for me, them, you know, people like Andrew Kaufman and Cowan and, you know, even people talking about German new medicine, I could sense that like nah, this is for real. Like there's something, you know, I trust them a lot more. It's
when someone is real. Like they're not being anything other than like David and Dawn.
It's
almost like, it's almost disarming that like they're just being themselves. That you're just like,
like what? But
that's
how
what
come
stood out about them? Is it's just people sitting in front of one camera. You know, they're not even doing what we're doing, pretending that they're in a big studio.
It's a micro mini studio, by the way, just in case you know what I mean. But yeah, it's true, man. You're right. It's disarming in a way, and you know, shout out to the people. Obviously, people are going to be skeptical, and I don't blame them because that's how you should feel. Yeah, you should feel like I'm not sure. In that case, at least prove yourself wrong. Whatever the doubts are, you know, at least do that for yourself, because the main thing here is about setting yourself free from these certain chains that are there. That's why I keep drilling that, because it is literally like that. Once you break free, you're like, wow, there are so many things that I ain't got to worry about. Like, you know how much traveling I've done? Do you know what I mean?
Under all of that. Yeah.
No, it ain't. But I look like I know, and I know people are waking up. I know more people are waking up, but they don't want to say anything because of. But we all made the mistake. We all got fooled. Do you know what I mean? So just wake up, just come, snap out of it, and like, yo, get more info so you can look after yourself, your family, whoever else. You know what I mean? Shout out to everyone who's watching it live, because you know, this information obviously might get. You know, you know, but we don't know. All in all, just make sure you get yourself as much info as you can, because that's what really makes sense at the end of the day. Don't just, you know, don't just pass on it. Just, no, man, I don't. Like, why don't you? Why don't you? Just check.
And you can get you can listen again on the podcast apps anyway, on iTunes or whatever. So it's probably one of them ones where you want to go back over it and have a little listen again. Yeah, man. You know, and just sort of ingest it, not with a chat room in front of you or whilst you're doing the washing up or putting the kids to bed or something. You know, you can just get it on the podcast app, have a listen to it a couple of times, and then get the book. And I see Irish in the chat has got the book. He said he just bought a book.
Shout out to the Irish Moss boss. Big up Amy in the building. Yes, shout out. I think that's our first ever, what do you call them?
Super chat.
Super chats. That's our first ever super chat, $1.99. You know what I mean?
Yes, big up.
Can't go wrong there, man. Salute.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate that. You know what we're gonna do with that? Get some biscuits now. I'm joking. We can't do that now. After we got maybe some organic biscuits.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Make sure it's all like
Maybe 1 pack of organic biscuits and a bottle of water.
yeah. Like spring
Just so
water.
you can wash them biscuits down.
You
It'd be well dry otherwise.
Come back on the air, but shout out to. That's the worst, isn't it? That's the obnoxious rapper, boy. Yeah, you know, you just out here doing nothing. That brother, come on, man. Finish your food and then chat to me, man. I don't need to be hearing all of that, man. What the hell's going on here? Yo, so that was another deep dive right there, man. I'm glad people enjoyed it. It looks like people did. Shout out to Regantology, Yamor, Amy. Shout out to Vinny B. Yes, man.
Yes,
we did
Vinny.
it, bruv. We did it, man. Appreciate you, brother. Shout out to Irish in the building. Good to see you, man. He said he bought the book as well. Smart. That's a smart guy right there. No, someone, man, should I say it or not? Someone hit me and there's like, yo, bruv, I seen the book, but it costs blah, 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 man. I don't know if I want to spend that much. I was like, really? You know what I mean? And this time now you got all these different kicks. Like, you're buying all these different garbs this week and that week, going out raving, this, that, and the third. So I was like, all right, it's up to you, man. It's up to you.
No, big up Irish,
that's like a
man.
couple rounds. That's a couple rounds, man, when you're out. Big up to King Chico, Del Strakes. Yep.
Sorry, Irish just donated £10
What?
on the super chat. So
Jesus, are you serious?
you need to mention. Get over to.
Irish, man, what are you doing, bruv?
Yeah.
We have to get
Get over to. Hang on, let me just
some
get
of
it
that
up.
gel on there. You know
Just
what I
give
mean?
it one last blast for the CMOS boss.
Of course.
Get your 20% discount on your favourite sea-based vegetables
Mm-hmm.
and seasonings.
Yeah,
And
boy.
with the code ABOUT20.
That's about 20. Get yourself any Irish moss gel. If you want to get yourself Irish moss gel with the bladder rack, you can get that. You can get the bladder rack flakes. Oh, that's low in stock though, so you might have to get in there quickly. You get some spirulina flakes though. Woo! I'm telling you, that's it. And then proper protein as well, man. Clean. You know what I mean? Sea salt and kelp seasoning. The wakame is banging. Like, yeah, I keep saying it anyway. I don't even want to drill it too much.
No.
But the wakame is banging. The sea spaghetti as well. That's definitely something delicious and very high and nutritious. And the Irish seasoning, well, that's out of stock. I'm sorry you missed that, mate. You know what I mean? But they'll be back with that. Make sure you go to the cmossboss.co.uk, as Dan said. And when you get to the cart, you type in about 20 and get yourself 20% off.
Whopping 20% as well.
Don't forget the dog spice, baby. Yeah, right. Yeah, man. Appreciate you lot locking in, man. Shout out to Genevieve, Easy Cuz. Yep. Reality, man. That's all we're dealing with here, man. And seriously, spread the word as well. You know, the bottom line is, man, there's a lot of us that kind of, you know, we realize you can kind of see through the smoke and the mirrors, see what's really going on. But we just don't know for sure.
No.
But as long as we can deal with the things that we do know, you know what I mean? And there are ways to prove it to yourself. Unfortunately, they call it something that anecdotal. So that means that it's not.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen, which is kind of
Don't
weird
matter.
because it really happened to me.
Yeah.
It actually happened. You know what I mean? So it's up to you to work it out and really look within, man. Once you can do that, then we can work on the outside, on the exterior. You know what I mean? Don't cover it up with makeup. That ain't gonna work forever.
No.
Forevermore, that's gonna make it worse. You know what I mean? All them
All
toxins.
them chemicals.
Yeah, man. So make sure you stay locked in, mother lovers. Big up all the crew. Oh, did I miss out anyone? Oh yeah, BLA. I thought I missed out somebody, man.
And Robbie Love, he popped
Robbie
in.
Love.
just
Oh
towards the
yeah,
end
Robbie
there.
Love was showing some love, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? IBMCs. Big up, man. Salute. Yeah, that's good little chit chat as well, man. Going on in the comment section. The comment sensors, man. Big up your more, of course. Hold tight, Mr. Green, man. We see you, bruv. You know what I mean? Don't worry, man. You will soon be here on the dark side. Soon. We'll have you soon, man. So what's going on for next week? All right, yeah, I'm going to be away, but I believe we'll be able to do one streaming, possibly.
Yeah.
I think so. You know what I mean? But stay in touch, mother lovers. You know we're out there. Just follow us. SYMNNKNA on Instagram, on Twitter. The live streams from now on are just going to be on YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've decided to drop Twitter and D-Live.
D-Live, yeah.
Because we don't really like those platforms as much. Nah. The streaming thing we're using only lets you do two things.
Yeah.
Regantology.
What the hell? Yo, you like getting beat now, man.
Good
Shout
boy
out to
points.
Regantology, bro.
5 good boy points from Regantology.
Jeez.
The wisdom we share is truly priceless. Yeah. We're just the facilitators of other people's wisdom.
Bruv, when you find out this stuff, and what I notice is obviously, I've spoken with some of you people about this, and hearing it from my mouth, I get it. It's like, okay, like, oh, that's interesting. But, you know, the more you start digging into it, you're just like, what the hell? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing how easy it is for you to be switched off of any, you know, like we were saying about catching a cold. Like, hey, you know what I mean? I ain't going to go outside without top on, man. Why not? Oh, I'll catch a cold. Like, but we never go like, well, who are you catching it from? We never say that. It's so normal for us to say that. But you know what I mean? Then you really think about it. You're like, rah, hold on a minute. Yeah, I swear it's every time I leave the window open, I go to sleep. I ain't got, you know what I mean?
Or have a late night. Every time I drink and have a late night, and then I start feeling like I've got a cold.
That's your body detoxing. That's your body detoxing, baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So learn more, mother lovers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Thank you to all the super chatters. We appreciate that. The common sensors out there. We'll be back again with some more shit you might not never know nothing about. My name is Mice Diggy. That's Dan DNA. And guess what, bitches, bitchettes? We're out.